Yes. I call to order the zoning committee meeting for August 13th, 2018. The first item on the agenda is to review the public hearing on an ordinance tentatively identified as ordinance number 1479, an ordinance requested by Farrell Chevrolet Inc. to amend the town of McCandless zoning code to change the zoning district of certain properties on Little Meadow Road in the town of McCandless from R2, 1 and 2 family residential district, to C3, highway commercial district, and amending the zoning map of the town accordingly. A vote on this ordinance is scheduled by town council on August 27, 2018. At the public hearing held on July 23rd of 2018, there were 3 residents or their agents of the affected area that spoke. Brad Knock of 204 Ashley Court, who is directly behind those properties, whose concerns were potential for increased stormwater runoff, which could result in erosion and landslides, trash being left around, lighting, and a retention pond that is stagnant. Then Cecilia Mayenzel of 90 Rickholt in Rexford echoed the same concerns Mr. Knock had and wanted to make sure that there was adequate plantings. Brian Smith, the son of the woman who was living in the Little Meadow Lane property, his mother is currently now in her mid-80s, and she is living in a nursing home. And Brian says he would probably have to sell to Farrell Automotive Group. I would like to turn council's attention to one of the exhibits mailed to each of you in connection with the rezoning titled The Rezoning Plan. The properties that are going to be rezoned from R2 to C3 are, if you look on the left-hand side of that handout, in the middle of the page, in the middle of that left-hand side, you see a dwelling which has a block B and L block and lot number 1205-Z-161. B and L 1205-D-161. Do you have it? Does everyone have it? Do you have it? Okay. Okay. And also the 40-foot private right-of-way right in front of that dwelling is also a parcel that's going to be rezoned from R2 to C3 if this is passed. And then the next one up the page, the dwelling, the B and L 1205-D-163. B and L 1205-D-163. Does everyone see that? Okay, well, included in that property, in that parcel, is land to be dedicated for conservation purposes. That will not be rezoned from R2 to Z3. That is to remain zoned R2. And Bruce, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. I had the opportunity to meet with the residents on site, along with the applicant's engineer, Dan Grachin, who's here tonight, and Keith Knock is also here representing Farrell. And Brad Knock, who is the owner of this property, unrelated to Keith, and Rich Menza and his wife Cecilia. We all met and discussed all of the items that Greg just went over and looked at the drainage. And the pond is located right here that we're talking about. It appears to have been used, it was designed as a pond. There's a bank here. It wasn't designed for, it may have been used for stormwater purposes at some point. There is an outlet. It's not designed as a stormwater outlet, but there is an outlet there. We could probably get in there and do work with DEP's permission because it was a pond that needs maintenance. So we get in there and do some work on it. I say we, it would be, Farrell would be getting in there and doing some work. And Dan Grachin hasn't designed the stormwater for it yet. But anyways, they would be happy if that could happen. And we also looked, there's a drainage area right here where all the water seems to drain down here and down through here. It's just all coming off the site. I just spoke with Dan. He has an idea that all the water is just all flowing down here from the whole entire site, and it can be collected. But in discussing this with Brad Knock and with the Menzas, that if this was zoned R2, the setback for construction would start at this location, and there'd be a 100-foot setback for building construction. There would be a minimum of a 20-foot setback for the parking lot. It probably won't go back that far anyways because of the grading that would have to take place in order to extend it back that far. But even a 20-foot, along with the buffer that's here, there'd be a 20-foot buffer here. So we're well over 100 feet away from, this is a minimum of 120 feet away from any residential property lines besides Lee Barrel's house, which is right here. So they like that idea a lot. And we also discussed the potential for stormwater. I have some concerns about the stormwater, and I've discussed them with Dan Grachin, the engineer for Farrell. And the concern is, will the swales and the pipes be capable of handling the water as it all is collected and discharged through there? It appears right now that the water hits an inlet here and an inlet here, and it runs down through Brad Knock's property into the Ashley Hill property. It then continues to run down across Ashley Hill, goes into a detention pond, and then down over the hill into a unnamed tributary of Pine Creek. So we want to make sure that everything has the capacity to handle the additional water. I was suggesting to Greg, and I'm suggesting to council, that we may want to have that information before we go any further with the rezoning. But if that all happens, the neighbors were okay with the rezoning. If we can control the stormwater, and if we can demonstrate. I just think we need a little bit more information before we move on with it.
Will you be meeting with the neighbors again?
I'm sure, yes.
Okay, so that they'll be aware of what's happening.
Oh, yes, they're already aware. I told them what had happened tonight, and I asked them to be here. Brad couldn't be here, he's out of town. I thought Rich was gonna be here and his wife, but apparently they couldn't make it either.
Thank you.
Anyone else in council have comments?
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
You said work on the pond. I don't know what that means, work on the pond. If you're planning on all that water coming down and draining down there, then what is the pond?
The pond that's there now it appears to have been just designed as an architectural feature, but it's all overgrown. And although it does attract, it's very natural. If you like natural, it's growing cattails and other wetland plants. There are a lot of frogs there. Rich Menza, who lives next door, said there were blue herons come in. Brad Knox, there's also a lot of mosquitoes. And so we had a little discussion. Rich says, yeah, the mosquitoes, the frogs eat the mosquitoes, the blue herons eat the frogs. It's a nice ecosystem. But it can be cleaned out, and I think at some point it may actually I don't know if it will or not, but it has the potential to be used as part of the stormwater system. Dan is nodding his head.
May I
Yes, it
ask,
has a potential.
who would continue to take care of this pond?
It would be the responsibility of Farrell.
So would the goal of that pond, so we don't know what the goal would be. We don't know if it's gonna be a stormwater detention, or we don't know if it's gonna be just a green space.
It could be a green space. Dan's probably
But
going
we're
to
not
have
sure.
a variety of ideas.
We'd like to take advantage of that pond and use that as a detention basin too, ma'am.
If that works.
Mm-hmm.
It has several opportunities to work within the stormwater detention concept. If it's detention, if it's infiltration, if it's a best management practice, there's any number of uses for it, I would say.
If we can use that for stormwater purposes, we could possibly intercept some of the water coming off of this uphill property and get that to the basin
Oh,
rather
yeah.
than onto the Knock property and help them in that regard.
He's probably getting this one.
And I know there was some talk about all of this additional parking possibly being pervious. Would
Yes.
that help that, has that been worked into this also?
I don't think we've looked at that far with it.
We've done small lots with impervious paving. This could be used in some respect, but probably not all of it. The green space, the islands in the middle certainly could be.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd just like to second Bruce's suggestion that this not move forward until we can demonstrate to the residents that we're resolving their stormwater issues and protecting them against the stormwater that will be generated by this newly paved surface.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
That's why I want to know if you're just meeting with them again, so that they're satisfied.
Yeah, well, Dan, what we have to do is Farrell's gonna have to authorize Dan to do a lot of extra work that would normally not be done until the site plan, until the land development process. But in this case, I believe this is exceptional because we're already having a major water problem there. And if we could head the problem off, I think it would help the neighbors tremendously, and it would show good faith toward the neighbors from Farrell's perspective if they would go ahead and do that. And I think they'd be happy with that.
And
So-
Bruce, procedure, excuse me, whoever I just interrupted, I apologize, but procedurally, because this is gonna be a material change to the amendment that we had a public hearing on and submitted, we're gonna have to go through the process.
No, should not be any change to the,
I thought
well,
the
it'd be a
orig-
lessening of the rezoning. You think even at that?
I mean,
If
yeah.
there's a lessening,
If you're changing, if you advertise that you're changing parcel A to, to C3, and all of a sudden parcel, only half of parcel A is getting changed to C3, I think that's gonna be.
so even if it's a
change.
lessening of the rezoning, you still think it needs to start over
Yeah,
again?
because it's not a matter of reduction unless is it a material change, and, that's gonna be a material change. Someone who saw that the first time around is not gonna be aware if they stop following along that change has happened, so we will have to have another public hearing.
Okay,
And so, I mean, that will certainly put those residents at least on notice too, as to what the new plan is.
okay. Well, in the meantime, we could start that process. Well, if Farrell authorizes Dan to do the work, we could do them concurrently.
Are either of these homes even being lived in right now?
oh, yeah.
Would-
The ones that are being removed?
Why we couldn't just.
The ones on,
The two that would become parking lot?
no, well, I think it's Mr. Smith's mother did live in,
Right, she's gone though.
Yeah.
It's vacant right now, yes.
I think they're
Both
both
of them are
vacant,
vacant.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think Tommy moved out of the other one.
Is there any reason why we can't just leave it as commercial property? We're not gonna be able to utilize that property.
Come up and like,
Keith, you gotta come up and identify yourself.
My name's Keith Knock, and I'm the, I guess, I don't know what you call, I do the construction management for Farrell. Why can't we just leave it all zoned as, commercial property? We're not gonna be able to utilize that, still keeping the same setbacks and, utilizing it, and that way we can go forward with it. And we're still doing what we need to do, because I think Dan has come up with some stuff and working with, that area as water retention for the property. It not only helps us, but I think some of that property, which we've been looking into, is also through the sewer system of McCandless, actually. So, I mean, it's kind of like we're helping you as much as you're helping us. So we're trying to work together and get this all taken care of. And we're willing to do what we can on this situation. And I'm just asking, so if you leave it that way, what would be the difference? Because I mean, all the only difference between R2 and the zoning of is commercial. That's it.
The setbacks make a big difference. So the setback now, instead of being from here, will be from here.
Well, we'll keep the same setbacks. That's all.
So you're saying that your setback, you would accept, and I don't know if that's even possible.
I'm not sure how mechanically we could enforce that, because, a future owner could not have the same agreement as you did. I mean, we'd have to figure out some way to record some sort of restrictive covenant.
Could put it in a deed.
That's
But the setback must stay at da-da-da-da-da.
I mean, it's a lot cleaner the way Bruce is suggesting it.
I would say just a delay of a month, is that right?
We could have the whole, I mean, it's probably 2 months from beginning to end of process. It's not gonna be, it's gonna be an easy change to the ordinance. It's gonna be a quick review by the county. It's just a matter of, running through the advertising.
So right now, if we would get Dan's work done in the meantime, if we would leave it at C3 and got Dan's work done, the earliest we would be able to do this would be in September. The earliest would be able to have the public hearing, unless we did a special meeting, would be in September.
Right,
And
I
so
mean,
we're delaying it a month at most,
right, and there's,
possibly not even a month.
possibly not even a month, depending on how you wanted to do the voting and when you wanted to have the public hearing. If you wanted to have it at the voting meeting, you could do it and then vote immediately. If you wanted to have it,
Yeah, I don't think we can do that by our,
You need you need a 6-day cooling period from the
okay.
public hearing to the vote.
Darn town charter always getting in my way of trying to expedite things.
Can we write it up for next week? Just have a special.
There would
5
be-
minutes,
There
or-
there would be enough advertising time
Yeah, we need the 30-day advertising.
For 30 days.
to, county review time.
And, yeah,
So then we-
45-day county review. We could get the county review done. We could get that done immediately.
And we could get it back to the planning commission for a quick, pop
Quick,
on the agenda.
yeah, we could
pop
put it,
off.
actually, we could just insert it in the September agenda.
Right. If that was what it was agreed to, that's what the residents signed off on. To me, it seems like it's gonna be tough.
That's
Yeah,
the point I was gonna make,
exactly,
that's
yeah.
the agreement the residents have.
No, not the commercial would go residential for that back section.
Well, it's currently residential.
I'm not understanding what,
It'd be a split zone lot, so that instead of changing the entire parcel to C3, we would essentially draw the map through,
Yeah.
2/3 of it.
Which part were you
2.3.
understanding?
well,
The process?
well, why, the proposal now is to have the blue section remain R2, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
The reason that Gavin is suggesting that or stating that it has to go through a new public hearing is a substantial change to the ordinance. The ordinance right now has all this as, and when we cut this piece out,
Okay.
that's a substantial change.
Okay, so if it were to go in as all commercial, we could proceed, but we're trying not to do that because we want the 100-foot to be R2.
Correct.
Okay,
And it clears up that whole mess of the conservation
Yeah.
easement, which was gonna be difficult to handle.
okay.
Didn't you have some preliminary stuff though, Dan, that would show,
For
for just the water runoff?
runoff?
Yeah, do you wanna, I don't know if we're ready, I don't know if we even wanna see that now, do we?
Seems premature.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think council was suggesting that we just, if you're gonna authorize it, that Dan do more detailed study rather than preliminary.
I mean, it's a cost for us, so if I don't get it changed,
Yes, it
then
will
it's
be.
gonna be an extra expense that's not necessary. Because if
So-
if I don't get the property changed, then I'm not gonna do anything.
Right, you
so I
won't
don't
do,
have to.
we won't do the work, but
Right.
what
So
we're
I'm trying
saying,
to, it's a catch-22 right now, and that's why I'm asking for the rezoning and move forward.
I
So
think
that way,
council's saying, because it's up to their discretion as to whether they want to move it forward or not. I mean, what I'm hearing, and I could be corrected because I don't get a vote, so no one cares what I really think, but it sounds like they're not going to consider making the change you're asking for until you nail down these other issues. Right.
Right, that's right. Exactly.
so what we're asking you for, Keith, is for you to authorize Dan to do a more detailed study, and while he's doing that, in the meantime, we'll proceed with redoing the ordinance.
I guess the issue is just the expense of doing that, to do a survey of all that property and come up with a design solution for the parking lot, the drainage and so forth, is quite an expense for borough to bear, without knowing if the rezoning will be approved or not. That's the concern.
How much expense are you talking about?
So, $20,000 plus.
Is it fair to say that there's already an issue out there that this is going to, no matter what happens, it's going to potentially help the problem?
Well, we're confident that we can help these people with, from what I've seen so far. I can't prove it, but my experience tells me that I can solve several problems with it if the process can go forward. I can't tell you what they are, except conceptually.
Sure.
So, and I think the problem is, Dan and Keith, is that if something happens, that the system can't handle the influx of water, and then Barrel's gonna be stuck spending an enormous amount of money trying to fix that. So if you spend it up front now, number one, if everything's okay, then you've already got the work, you got a jump start on the site plan, if they rezone it.
Sounds like the work should be done anyway.
Sorry?
Sounds like the work should be done anyway to find out,
Oh,
to control the water, regardless of the
Should
application.
be done anyway, but the question is who pays for
But
it?
who pays for it? I mean, right now, because it's actually McCandless sewer water running
Right.
too.
It's not our pond.
Not the pond. The pond isn't the
The runoff.
problem. Where the water's coming from comes from McCandless's water and sewer. Not coming from the pond.
No,
don't think so.
no, it doesn't, Keith.
No.
There's nothing everything's coming off of either Lee's property or your property. I mean, there are defined runoff areas right here and definitely right through here.
Surface runoff, you mean?
Surface runoff, it's channels.
I think what Keith is alluding to, Bruce, is the diversion channels along the backs of those lots,
Oh,
like
you
they
mean
were
these
put in
here?
for Ashley Court.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Part of
Well,
the
those were put in, it's not, the water's not coming from there,
No.
the water's bypassing it.
Right. McCandless would just own those swales and those inlets and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know that we own the swales.
Oh, okay. We have to look into that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's some of the stuff that we have to look into,
So
but
we-
that's not,
We can help you with that part of it. I mean, with that part of the research, we can help you with it.
How many properties are actually getting water problems? We've heard from 2 people, but
It actually is 2 people that are getting the
it's
water.
only the 2.
It's this one and this one, actually. Rich isn't getting the water problem. But this one is and this one is.
And none of the houses behind the other parking lot, the existing water, getting any water problems?
Isn't that third property the one that woman spoke? That's Cecilia?
Yeah, she's not having a water problem. I think all the water is actually running onto Brad Knott's property.
Correct.
When we went out in the field and looked at it, it looks like it's coming from Lee's property and from up here. So it's coming from here and here. And right about here is an inlet, and there's a channel coming down through this property that's channeling the water.
Anyone, any other questions? So we'll table it then. And,
Well, you can't vote until the
Yeah, I know.
last meeting, but
Yeah.
it sounds like further, that's.
We'll try to facilitate getting the ordinance redone immediately. We'll get on a planning commission agenda, get it to the county.
Would you consider this a new application or just allowing them to amend those?
I think just amend what's there, they'll use starting over.
Okay.
But we get it to the county.
We can put together the ordinance very quickly,
Yeah,
next couple of days.
so we'd need, Dan, can you knock this piece off of your legal description without much trouble?
To rewrite the legals for that?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
You can do it or can't do it?
No, that's not a problem.
Yeah, if you could get that get it to us immediately.
Yeah, new map and a new legal.
Yeah, new map, new legal. I think you already gave us the new map. Did
Sure.
you give us the, did you give us a new one with the R2? I thought Christina gave me a new map with R2 on it.
No.
This one actually shows it as R2. There's an R2 right here, I
And
think.
the proposed line is this line.
Yeah.
Proposed line. Now that'll move from here.
This is,
Yeah, so if you could do that and then just give us the map and let's
That's
get it
not
up.
hard. That's
Yeah, I
not
think-
hard to do. The hard part would be the finished design work.
Right. I think something that gives us a great degree of confidence that it could be done.
Flip the page.
So, I think they've already.
I mean,
don't know-
it's already done
Right.
for you. I mean, he has a preliminary,
But it doesn't have the calculations necessary to
no,
get us
but
there.
you can,
I'm not sure how 5 minutes should hurt to look at
Okay.
what they've got.
So,
yeah, you're good.
Mr. Knox's issue is with this inlet above his home. It's collecting water from a number of different sources. There's a diversion channel across the back of his lot that's bringing water to that inlet. There's one across the back of his neighbor's lot bringing water to that inlet. Also, the property uphill is all being directed through this ditch to that single inlet. So our solution would be to expand the base and make it bigger, capture this ditch with a new inlet and put the water into the basin rather than into his inlet and pipe it to the same point underground, not above ground. So we substantially improve the situation for that inlet.
And who would be doing all that work?
We would have to do that
Farrell?
under the,
Mm-hmm.
under the approval
And how big are the existing storm pipes?
15 inches, I believe. But again, the issue is just there's too much water going to a single point right now.
Right.
And there will be more because all of this now is
Well,
paved, right?
Well,
Because
yeah,
that was
that's-
grass before
Right.
and trees.
That'll be controlled by this basin then, and metered out slowly through this inlet.
And that's where the pond was?
so as of now, all the water is going to go into the, what it was the pond.
Yes.
And they actually will get, it looks to me like less water during the storm, if
Yes.
there's a storm, and then it will slowly go out, leave that pond as we go.
Correct.
I mean, I've seen these before. And I kind of wish they were bigger than two 15-inch pipes, but
That's my concern, you're voicing my concern, I think both of you voiced my concern, is that with it being a 15-inch pipe, theoretically, the amount of water coming off at a given moment will not increase. But there'll be more water over time just because of the way stormwater works, is that right?
Right.
Dan? But we're now putting it all, well, eventually it all ends up
Yeah.
here anyways.
Correct.
But now it's being piped, and
I guess my question would be the pipe that is actually on the lower property on Ashley Court, the one where it says dwelling. Is he willing to allow that eventually, not necessarily through Burl, but through someone, to enlarge that pipe to something a little bit more reasonable, which would mean digging up his property for?
well, it would have to be dug up, it would have to be dug up. He'll have to get granted partial easement anyways. An easement for a little bit, because this isn't all, some of this is on his property. He expressed a willingness to do it just to take care of the problem. Do you remember that being said, Dan? That he would grant an easement if that was needed?
I didn't discuss that with him, Bruce, but he's certainly willing to work
Yeah,
with us.
he was willing to work with us. Now, the problem is, Steve, if this pipe has to be enlarged, then it has to be enlarged the whole way through the system.
Yeah.
And that's my fear.
But the rest of it would be in the street.
It's still, but if it has to be enlarged in one spot, it has to be enlarged everywhere.
I
because
understand that,
it
but,
keeps getting bigger
right,
and
it
bigger.
gets smaller, it backs up, but the rest of it would be in the street. It wouldn't be right through somebody's, I don't know what he has over there, garden or
Yeah, so you're worried about.
fence or whatever he's got going
Yeah,
on
he's
there.
okay with this anyways, and this would be okay if it had to be restored. The problem is, once you start digging up the street and have to enlarge the storm sewer, it's gonna be beyond Barrel's.
Right, of course,
Desire
that
to
would
even
all
do
be
it.
beyond what they'd have to do.
Dan, how would you do the emergency spillway? And that's a sort of a,
This structure, Bruce, this one would meter the pond water out at a slower rate to this inlet, and then get it back to where it belongs in that inlet.
but where's the emergency spillway that's required to go?
I don't have one,
Maybe too small.
not shown yet.
Yeah, so I'm a little worried about how that's gonna work too.
Those details will be confirmed in a review by our stormwater engineer.
So,
Which we'd have to do anyhow before, one for approval, just of the lot itself. That wouldn't have to make any difference in regards to rezoning.
well, it does, it does, in the sense that if it doesn't get approved this way, then we're faced with a whole different problem. And so that's why I'm suggesting that we do that work up front. And it's not gonna be a duplication if it gets rezoned, you've already got the work done, or at least the bulk of the work done. Maybe not every detail, but you're close to it. And it gives council the benefit of knowing that this problem can be controlled, and gives the residents the benefit of knowing that this problem can be controlled.
That enlarged basin looks like what, about at least twice the size of the old pond.
Yeah, it does. Maybe even more than that.
Okay,
So we will vote then on August 27th to, what will the vote be?
You can motion the table.
Right, it wouldn't be a
request.
vote.
Well,
Well, your motion to table and, so
Okay.
yeah, I guess we'd vote second and
Okay.
then.
is it on the agenda?
Put it on the agenda.
Didn't you move the table about 5 minutes
No, you
ago?
can't hear.
You can't do
But you said that, I thought.
Yeah,
maybe
That's what he says he's
well,
gonna
I
plan to
can't-
do.
Yeah, that's what I plan.
Can't, okay.
I mean, I do feel like they'll be able to manage it, but
I do too, but I'm just not, I need more certainty, I'd like to have more certainty.
Okay. Yeah.
And if, Keith, if you're good with this, if you're gonna authorize Dan to do that, and Dan, you can get that to us tomorrow or the next day, that'd be great. We'll get it underway.
Yes.
unfortunately, there's no way to guarantee Burl spending $20,000 if they're gonna get their way, if they want anyhow.
Right.
Okay,
I mean, that's what I'm, that's my concern.
I understand.
I mean, if I'm spending that kind of money, I mean, put yourself in, and if you owned a business, what would you do? You're gonna put out $20,000-$30,000 to give up an idea that might be okay. That's not something we do. That's not a good business decision, you know, that way.
well, to safeguard those residents, yeah, I would do it.
I mean, we're gonna safeguard the residents. I mean, we're gonna do our best to make sure. That's why we even did some preliminary work already. I mean, that's something we've always done. I mean, he called me with a problem 3 years ago. And I had a contractor there probably within less than a week fixing the problem.
Yeah,
And it was fixed where it was. So I mean, it's not a situation that I don't back my word when I do it.
okay.
I know you do.
I think Farrell has always done that pretty much so all throughout the community for the whole time. So if we say we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. That's not the case. That's why I'm asking the council here for some understanding on my pouring of it, spending the money. I'd like to have it rezoned, and I'll spend the money and I'll do what is necessary and I'll make it right. I'm not gonna cheat anybody in that respect. I wanna do it right.
I believe you, certainly, absolutely. What I know happens though, is I can't guarantee, you know, I can almost guarantee right now they're not going to vote for it, but the problem is if we do it the way you want and they don't vote for it this way, then we're actually going to hold things back even another month. Or you're going to decide not to do it at all.
Correct.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Let me know, guys.
Waiver.
And Toby's getting
The next item on the agenda is to review a land development application for direct supply Optora on behalf of Welltower for Sunrise of McCandless located at 900 Lincoln Ave Drive. Do you want to explain this, please?
Sure. The applicant is Sunrise Assisted Living, and that is located off of Lincoln Club Drive, back behind the Club of North Hills and North Park Lounge. There's a assisted living facility back there. They want to add 28 units and 28 beds. I think they're all single bed units, private rooms. And also expand the kitchen and one other thing, the storage. There's 3 little additions.
Freezer cooler.
Freezer cooler. So that's the proposal. And we have with us Mark Michelini and McLaughlin, I want to say McLaughlin. And I forgot his first name, I'm
Jerry.
sorry. Jerry, of course. Jerry McClanagan. Sorry,
Okay.
I know Mark probably too well. So at this time, who's going to take the lead?
I guess I am.
Jerry, we want to get your drawings up. We have 2 easels for you.
Okay.
What do you got?
Bunch of the same stuff we had.
Yeah, let's put them up. Going elevation. Since that's Jerry's specialty. Okay, at this time I'll turn it over to Jerry and she can do.
Yeah, from behind you here. Good evening, my name is Jerry McClanagan. I'm with Direct Supply Aptura out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are the design builder for this project. We're going to do a 28-bed addition to the Sunrise and McCandless, taking on exactly the same look that you see now within that building. You may recognize it. It looks like a large Victorian mansion at this point in time, and we will continue that. The addition will go to the west end of the existing building. So North Park Lounge is over in this location. There are some apartment buildings at this location. Lincoln Park Road is here. Lincoln Club Road is here. This is the circle. The addition will be 4 stories, as the building is currently. It's I-2 occupancy. It will be assisted living, memory care, and a transitional care unit, the same as the existing buildings, similar floors for each one of those various levels of care. So it's a pretty simple project, and we're excited to bring it forward. Yes, ma'am.
My concern is the parking is not good there now. So what's going to happen if you're going to add more rooms?
We are, currently you have 51 parking spaces at the building. We're going to increase that to 86 parking spaces. We're going to wrap the new parking spaces around our new addition, so that you'll come in and be able to turn to your left and gain greater parking. So there are currently, the 51 are the ones that are in this area, and we're adding the additional 35 additional parking spaces.
So people would have to walk completely around the building to the front.
That's correct. So generally, in a case like this, staff members are asked to park at the furthest portions of the parking lot, and residents and staff will be able to park closer to the canopy at the front.
I ask that because I have relatives in that building and I can never find a parking place.
There you go. Well, we're trying to fix that up for you.
Will actually be over parked in your ordinance. We'll have 9 additional spaces above and beyond what the ordinance requires. So we kind of anticipating, so we added a few spots, just because we know some of these facilities are tight with parking.
We had some questions about landscaping and especially buffering between the, actually this is residential and residential, right through here, this is Lincoln Club. And the buffering is this is a, Mark, or Jerry, you guys want to explain what goes on here? You have a wall.
Sure. I'm going a little bigger here. I don't think that's, oh, there's the wall.
Yep.
Yeah, we're adding a 6-foot high wall as prescribed in the code, and doing the H buffer along that whole area. So it's densely planted and will continue to be.
It almost looks like it's overplanted, and chances are, the way our ordinance is written, we tried to reduce the number of plantings because as they mature, it's good when they're first planted, but this density in this narrow of a space gets to be tough. But anyways, the other part of that question is the same thing, was when we looked at the photometrics for the lights, there's just a severe drop off, and they're open lights. And they're beautiful lights, they fit in with the rest of the architecture. And so we were all sort of baffled by that. And I use the word baffled on purpose because,
Ha-ha. Punishment for everyone.
there you go.
Terrific.
And you guys want to explain why they have the sudden, this is the light fixture. Want to explain how we get the sudden drop off?
Sure, there are 6 panels, 6 light panels around the top of it, the glass panels. We're gonna paint 3 of them black to direct the light onto the parking lot. And that should provide the appropriate photometrics throughout the new parking area and not throw light onto the existing site behind us. Not to mention, we have the dense planting of the trees as well.
Yeah, and they're only 10 foot
They're
tall.
very low,
Right.
yeah. Is there any way to substitute plastic or colored glass rather than have to paint it? Is that maintenance?
It shouldn't be. That's basically the way these are taken care of, is by painting.
That's the way the existing ones, that's what they've done on, I think
Yep.
they're now, and they're just matching
Just
in.
thought I'd ask.
Yep, and these are all LED lights as well, so they should be burning brightly and keeping everybody safe in the parking lot, giving them lots of light to see where they're going.
And the stormwater was upgraded to accommodate the additional impervious surface.
Correct.
And there's additional infiltration in we call a forebay. And if anybody wants an explanation of the forebay, I'm going to let Mark explain the forebay.
I've got these if you want.
This is the existing stormwater facility, so we basically maintained the outer footprint of it, and we deepened sort of the central portion. There's an existing forebay where the existing runoff comes in on the eastern side with a forebay and a berm. A forebay basically is used, the water comes in, any sediment settles out, so it's like a water quality feature. In the lower storm where you get most of your sediment drop off, it has the volume, it's sized for the like the 1 year storm. So what we did was we maintained the forebay, the existing forebay. We deepened the central portion of it, and we brought our storm into the west side of it. We relocated the existing outlet structure, centralized it, and then put in a new forebay for the water quality treatment for our new parking area. And we also added a sand filter. There isn't any infiltration, so we added I believe it's about a 2 foot deep sand filter to meet the infiltration requirements.
At the time this was originally developed, we didn't have the infiltration requirements or the best management practices that we have today. So we had to do a little more upgrading than might normally be expected. In addition to that, they're going to be obligated to pay an inspection fee estimated by our stormwater engineer for a 10-year period.
And then we also, your new ordinance has a landscaping requirement around the stormwater facility. So we did upgrade that, and our landscape plan, we added wildflower mix on the inside banks and some trees along the top as required by your new ordinance.
Is this all green space? All this?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep,
It's all nice.
here.
And there's a stream which runs down through here. And there's a house back here that's going to probably be demolished if it hasn't already, and a new one's going to be built somewhere right around here, up out of the floodplain.
Here you go, Kim. This is fine. So that's, they need to flip that for you so you're right, but
And this is pretty highly planted.
And I think there's a lot of wetland here too.
There is wetland, all this
Is that all
kind of
wetland
shaded
that I'm
area, you
seeing?
can see that's all wetland area. Any other comments?
Okay. Next
Thanks,
meeting,
thank you.
Thank you.
2 weeks.
Very good.
August 27th. Alex, you're up. You have a drawing?
Full size.
You don't? Okay, I gotta get mine out. Exchange packages here, and I'll be right back.
Okay, the next thing is to review a simple subdivision application for Thomas A. Piper for the Piper plan of lots located at 573 Cumberland Road.
Want a pointer or is it okay?
I'm good. Yeah, my name is Alex Tran, I'm with Tran Corporation. I'm here on behalf of Tim Piper. He owns this two-story brick duplex here. All he would like to do is divide it in half along the party wall so that he can sell each portion of the townhouse there. And that's as simple as it can be. It's all he's looking to do. Nothing is going to be added to the building itself. It's going to stay exactly the same as it is. Now, it is a non-conforming building, but that's the existing building. So, one of the comments here. Let's see if I can-
It just says it's an existing non-conforming building and it's gonna remain an existing non-conforming building. Nothing's really changing regarding the non-conforming.
How big are those lots gonna be?
Oh,
They're about a little 0.38 acres, 0.57 acres each.
And do we not have some sort of thing in the,
that's what we're saying, is it doesn't meet any of the requirements as it is.
right,
And this is actually isn't, these duplexes, and there's a series of them along Cumberland
right,
Road,
I got
are,
them.
it's zoned R3 as opposed to R2, so that's why it doesn't meet any. And I don't know what the reasoning for it being zoned R3 was, but that's what it is. And that's part of that's the other part. Even as a duplex, it doesn't meet the requirements for a, even if it was R2, it doesn't meet the requirements.
So do we end up with any problems with our minimum lot size in
No,
the future?
No, because it's already non-conforming and it's staying that way.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, Alex, thanks for coming in. Next meeting is August 27th. Welcome to stay here. That was Alex Trent, by the way, for the minutes.
Okay, the next thing is review the land development application for Seavest Healthcare Properties located at Duncan and McKnight Roads.
So I'm going to turn it over to Dusty Elias Kirk.
Thank you. Can I put some stuff
Yep,
down?
take
right here?
yourself in on there.
Thank you.
And Dusty, I'll let you introduce everybody else,
Okay, thank you.
because I know you remember everybody.
I do. So thank you for hearing us today. We are here for the land development application for the four-story hospital and medical office building. 2 stories will be the hospital with 11 beds and 10 ER bays, and then 2 stories of medical office building with a little over 13,000 square feet on each floor. So with me is Greg Plotchek, and I think you know him from CEC Engineers, Kathy Haran from Philo Wilkie, who's designing the building. Also, Jeff DePaulis is here from CEC, who's done the trip generation analysis. And David Goldberg is here from AHN. Michael Costu's with me, and then Dana Clan, also from CEC. So everything has gone through Planning Commission, and we had extensive discussion with the Planning Commission about this project. We also had a, CEC has worked with Dan Desarov and really got, I think, a very clean comment letter where all the comments of your engineer have been addressed. We also got approval, I think, Friday or today from Trans, confirming the trip generation numbers and the calculations. So I have some handouts which we prepare just to make things a little clearer, and I can pass them out to you. So that you, oops, that's okay. So I just pass those down. Is there enough? There should be.
Did you get one, Kim?
You need another one? Yeah. Okay, Greg, do you want to start with the C200, explaining the site plan?
Sure. We can just a little bit more.
Get out of the way.
I'll get out of the way here too.
Okay, good evening. What you're looking at here is the master plan. Again, as Dusty alluded to, this is the piece of property that's really kind of the last undevelopable piece of McCandless Crossing. It wasn't part of the McCandless Crossing. It was, the property was retained by the Coyne family, and it is under agreement with CVest for the development of this project. So what we have here is the master plan, which shows our building that we're in land development right now, and it's a 4-story building. And then it's reserved here on the master plan. Mr. Coyne has not made any final decisions on what he's proposing to develop, but at this point he's anticipating a restaurant. And so that's what's depicted here, with the knowledge that
Keep going, I'm gonna get ready to make a point early.
with the knowledge that he's coming back in for final land development and planning commission approval.
That's what that says right there.
Right, there's a note that alludes to that. Again, this is the approach that Bruce Betty had recommended, that we come in with a master plan, because we're designing the site to accommodate him building something. And what we've done is we've actually, I think, prudently kind of assumed the worst case in terms of parking. We have a restaurant at 5,500 square feet plus a 1,200 square foot patio, so that's parked at 67 spaces. That's the most he could do. The other thing he's thinking about is a bank, which would be far less parking. It'd be a smaller building. But we're designing the site, all the infrastructure, to accommodate his path.
So if you turn just to section 1 in the handout, it's a blow up of what is down here, really at the, over on the right of the zoning requirements, so that it would be easier for you to see. And it covers what the parking requirements that Greg was just talking about. Do you want to
I
explain?
think maybe go back maybe to the beginning,
Okay.
in terms of, and then you'll see, I think, how we got to the point where we are on the site design. As you know, this is in the development district overlay, so there are protection measures in place for environmental resources, including steep slopes, woodlands, waters and streams, as well as buffer yards. So again, this being that last parcel within the development district, we had all those issues to contend with respect to the site capacity analysis that's defined by your zoning ordinance. So we did meet the site capacity calculation as confirmed by the Gateway engineers, Dan Dizeroth. But to do so, and then there were also, as noted on the master plan, there were 2 variances granted, zoning variances, with respect to environmental resource impacts to both woodlands and to steep slopes. And the basis for those are that the majority of the steep slopes on the site were actually man-made. They were created historically over the past filling of that site, particularly when they widened McKnight Road. That became a disposal area for PennDOT fill. And then the majority of the woodlands are young woodlands, and then the only real mature woodlands are over to the western part of the site. And so we are actually, to meet our site capacity evaluation, necessitated a couple things. This is a prototypical project that CVest is developing in conjunction with Allegheny Health Network. They're doing 4 of these sites across southwestern Pennsylvania, Harmer Township, Brentwood Borough and Hempfield Township in Westmoreland County, and then this site in McCandless. And they've developed a prototypical building that is 2 stories. And to meet the site capacity restrictions that we had on this site, we had to go to a 4-story building. So it's a smaller footprint, more compact, with 2 levels of hospital and 2 levels of MOB associated with it. So even with the smaller footprint of the building and accommodating a future development by the landowner, Mr. Coyne, necessitated the use of a retaining wall that we can talk a little bit when we get into the grading discussions. But one of the main drivers of this retaining wall was to save and not impact additional environmental resources, particularly steep slopes and young woodlands. We had no impacts to wetlands and streams. We avoided those on the site. That's what's shown on blue. And then we've also provided the buffers required by the development district zoning as well. So the impacts that we did get zoning variances for were to steep slopes. And again, with the knowledge, I think the premise of that approval was the fact that they were man-made, and then also to young woodlands. And we limited those, really the best woodlands on the site are in that natural stream valley that's being preserved over to the western part of the property. So I think that was a good basis to kind of hone in how we got to where we are in the site plan.
And that's great. Could you also explain how the access,
Oh,
I think that's
good.
one, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
The other thing that really drove the need to have any environmental resource impacts beyond what was permitted and therefore approved by the zoning hearing board was that the only place that the site can really be accessed is directly across from St. Simon Way, which is the road that goes up to the Lowe's development. So that becomes a 4-way intersection. So as you can see, that is where we're kind of like into the western part of the site. We curved that in as fast as we could, and that's where we started a retaining wall that kind of circles the site and ends over here. So the access had to be at that location. We couldn't move it any closer to the intersection of McKnight and Duncan. That was the way it was designed and for the master plan for McCandless Crossing. Maybe I'll switch right now to landscaping. 2 different buffer yards under effect. Buffer yard H along McKnight Road and buffer yard A along Duncan. This plan represents landscaping that was actually kind of a negotiated settlement with Mr. Coyne because if indeed he has a restaurant proposed, he didn't want to hide the visibility of the restaurant. In fact, I think this is a nice view here that'll show this. And because this depicts a restaurant, and again, as Toby alluded to, Mr. Coyne will be coming back before you on land development, whatever he decides to build. But for the purposes of staying consistent with all of our land development documents, we're showing a restaurant. That's actually a perspective that's actually drawn to scale. It's a neat piece of software called Lumion that our landscape architects use. So that's a view if you were at McKnight and Duncan, headed in a southbound direction right at the intersection with Duncan. That gives you a view, again, of the potential Coyne restaurant with our proposed building in the back, the 4-story building.
That's an incredible amount of cars. I've never seen half that many cars at that intersection.
Yeah, it depends what time of the day you're there, Steve.
We'll leave it over the buildings.
So anyway, we did meet the landscape requirements of the ordinance, and again, Mr. Coyne feels comfortable with how the plantings are spaced. There was a question about during the planning commission meeting, there was a question was one of the species an invasive species, and that we have confirmed that's not the case. In fact, we actually had changed the landscape plan from the original submission to remove that species, even though it wasn't invasive. All the species here are either native or natural occurring in the vicinity of this geography. So we have a pretty good landscape plan that meets the requirements of the ordinance. And that software does, I mean, it's obviously, that may be another question is, boy, they look great, those trees. The idea is those trees are full life. It's not the day they're planted, but they do get a little bit of growth, and that's what's reflected in the perspective view.
So under tab 1, it shows the buffer yard requirements, and that's what Greg was really just talking about. Needing a buffer yard.
Maybe we'll go to the grading. Because we did request in our land development submission a waiver from the retaining wall height. And again, I think the discussion about the site capacity analysis, I think, was very good to understand why. I mean, having done this kind of work for now 38 years, retaining wall is a very bad word. We try to avoid retaining walls where all possible, but in this site, we just really were forced into that. And I realize not everybody can see the topography, but these contours where they're real tight here, that represents the old fill that was placed by PennDOT. It was actually a fairly steep fill slope. It's actually almost as steep as 1-to-1, 45 degrees. And where that fill ends is where our retaining wall, that kind of dips down into the low point of the site. And that's where the worst case height of the retaining wall is. The retaining wall comes up very quickly up both sides. And so the majority of the wall, and in fact, we have a view that shows that. I might get back of that one. Nope. Yeah, this one here. Now that perspective, again, using that Lumion software, that's if you were on McKnight Road driving northbound. As you approach Duncan, you can see in the foreground there, and that would be looking right into our site, and you can see beyond the white car there, that's the retaining wall. That would be right in this area right here. So in this area, the retaining wall is 12 to 15 feet. It actually comes up and gets a little lower, only about 5 feet, and then here it plunges down where the old PennDOT fill is. The highest point of the wall is 46 feet, and then it soars back up so that the wall appears about 4 or 5 feet. So we do have a corner of the site that from a perspective viewpoint, it's actually a good advantageous point because nobody's going to see it. About the only place you'd see that wall would be from the very edge of Doodlebug's parking lot, and it's still about 250 to 300 feet away, so it's going to be off in the distance. So that's what drove. Now this wall is being designed as an engineered wall. Our design is just about complete. It will be submitted as noted on the grading plan. It will be submitted to the town engineer for review and approval before construction starts, but we're not waiting. We're actually going to be submitting that most likely next week. If you're wondering what kind of wall that is, if you're familiar with McKnight Road, if you've been to the block Northway, the wall that's along McKnight Road, that's very similar to what this wall will look like.
Greg, will you talk about the fence that the planning commission put as a condition?
Yeah, and did you put that in your
Yeah.
hand? Okay.
In the handouts, if you start under 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Now, I think we repeated the technical design twice between 3 and 5, but it shows the difference between a 6-foot and an 8-foot.
Yeah, that came out of the planning commission discussion last week. As you know, the grading ordinance with walls in McCandless actually identifies a 6-foot chain link fence is required along a couple of retaining walls. I know you guys don't want a chain link fence. We don't want a chain link fence. It did specify 6 feet, and we're showing an ornamental. It's a plastic composite material that, in fact, you have a picture of it. It's a nice looking fence. And one of the things that is actually Rob Gardner in the planning commission, in the areas where the wall exceeds 15 feet in height, and again, that's limited to this area, the back corner of the site, actually remote from all the entrances of the building. But as an extra measure of public safety that he had requested, and when they made it a condition of their approval, is that at those locations, anywhere that the wall exceeds 12 feet, we were going to increase the height of the fence from 6 feet to 8 feet. So we verified with the fence supplier that they can indeed make 8-foot high fence. That's what will be along the top. In addition, all these parking spaces that face the wall also has a guide rail, a PennDOT guide rail. So you have 2 levels of protection. You have the guide rail for the vehicular concern, and then you'll have the 8-foot fence for any pedestrian
Yeah,
issue.
it's not really shown here because
Correct.
it's,
I assume, I'm not seeing which one you've actually chosen. Genesis, Majestic, Classic? Classic what you've chosen? Glad it's not the Invincible. That looks like you're going to jail.
With respect to
You mean with the
storm,
curve at the top, Steve, yeah, I understand. No,
with
we're
respect
not
to
choosing that.
stormwater, again, I'm emphasizing the fact that we're creating all the infrastructure for Mr. Coyne to do whatever he proposes to do in the future. We're providing all the stormwater. It's actually being done, as you can imagine from our site capacity analysis. We don't have any extra room for some surface detention, so it's all being done underground in this portion of the parking lot. There's diameter pipes within this portion of the parking lot, and we actually creatively designed that situation because of the fill condition back there with the wall. The actual excavation for the detention is into natural ground, not into fill, so that we feel good about that design. It's also being lined. We are not infiltrating groundwater here. That's the last. We're infiltrating stormwater. That's not what we want to do with a retaining wall that's around the perimeter of the property. So this will actually go into a lined facility of underground piping and then released at a slow rate, detaining it to pre-development conditions and discharging it where it's currently going onto that box culvert beneath McKnight Road. Yes, Bill?
Would you speak to the long-term stability of that wall? I mean, given it was, I guess you just did in part, it was built somewhat on fill, but it was an 8-foot high wall. And
Our proposed wall?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the wall's been designed as a reinforced earth wall, so for example, we go down to the low point of the site where the wall is the highest, and we start at the toe of that slope by bringing up fill in compacted layers that has reinforced geogrid in it that is tied to that block, so that's brought up layer at a time, and so that's meant to be a reinforced earth mass. It's meant to last forever.
Yeah.
It's not a concrete wall, it's the block, it's the facing, but you're really relying on the reinforced fill that you're constructing to form the stability. And we drilled, to our client's benefit, they understood the significance of this element of the site, so we drilled along the entire center line of that wall. We have adequate geotechnical information, and we have a good sound design that we'll be submitting to the town to be reviewed.
Thank you.
And I think one of the conditions that I think is in the engineering report in Bruce Bay is that it's inspected and.
Yeah,
So,
we have the follow-up during construction. Our firm expects to be out there monitoring that compaction and that fill so that we certify that wall, when it's construction, we're going to certify that it's construction, meets the design and the requirements of the drawing.
You know, they'll have an inspector on site for each lift, and it will be certified. We'll be doing inspections, spot inspections to verify what they're doing.
Just as a detail, Greg, is this similar in a general sense to what I think most people refer to as a Versa-Lock wall, some sort of a connectors between each layer of the
Yeah, the
wall?
blocks are interlocked, but then
Yeah.
the important part of this bill is that you have what's called a geogrid. It's a synthetic material that will extend back from that wall 25 or 30 feet. That's called the embedment zone. So you're creating a reinforced mass of heavily compacted fill that then is tied to the wall to support it. So
It's not going to go anywhere.
exactly. It's a perfect application for this kind of a site.
Thank you again.
And it's also laid back slightly, so it's
Yeah, there's a
not-
batter
it's not
angle, on it. It's
vertical.
not vertical, there's a little bit of a batter angle to it. We covered stormwater, all the utilities are available to the site, obviously from Duncan. We're actually tying into a sanitary sewer that's down in the valley bottom, that goes underneath McKnight's. We talked about landscaping.
you want to talk about traffic?
Yeah, the traffic, and I have Jeff DePaulis here, our traffic engineer. He can review the trip generation, which has been approved by Trans, your consulting engineer. And really, it's a fairly nice design. Right now, there is a lot of striping in here. We will actually be eradicating some of that striping to create a left turn stacking lane of 100 feet, Jeff?
Yes.
About 100 foot. So they'll just be eradicating some of that existing striping and then painting that out so that we have our left turn into the site. Jeff, you want to expand upon some of the traffic?
Sure.
And Trans's trip generates their letters in your packet, the last number 7.
Evening, Jeff DePaulis with CEC. As Greg indicated, Trans Associates has reviewed a trip generation letter that we comprised. Essentially, the Coyne property itself within the transportation district was assigned 236 trips. The hospital, we are anticipating, will generate approximately 198 trips. And then as Greg said, we had made an assumption for a 5,500 square foot restaurant. That's going to generate about another 68 trips. So if Mr. Coyne does go through with the restaurant at 5,500 square feet, we will have to buy, or he will have to buy an additional 30 trips from the excess bank that's available. But the hospital itself will be under the trips assigned to the development district until Mr. Coyne develops his restaurant.
Jeff, I just want to emphasize that point, that you are purchasing the trips for the hospital, and there was an adequate number of trips. This is our transportation district, and this was assigned 236 trips according to the transportation district, and the hospital is within that amount. Depending on what Chris Coyne does, it will exceed that amount, and by whatever amount it exceeds, there is an excess trip bank. First, he will have to go to other property owners to try to purchase them. And we didn't talk about the trips at Sunrise, but Sunrise's trips, they assumed when they first started way more trips than they needed. So they do have an excess amount of trips. So that would be a place that he may be able to go to buy trips. If that fails, then we have excess trips in our trip bank.
So, and I think you also talked about parking, and I know that was a concern for Chris Coyne's, but as you said, there is sufficient parking and it's on your zoning requirements and there's.
So we
anything-
actually have 5 additional parking spaces above what's required by the zoning ordinance.
And there will be a sidewalk along the entire Duncan side of the property.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk all along Duncan Avenue, along our frontage.
Anybody have any questions before he moves on about the?
And here's one additional view.
Trips.
It's actually, this is the view just a little bit east of our site entrance, looking eastward back towards McKnight Road. And again, I think that's a good representation of what the elevation will look like with the landscaping that's ultimately going to grow to those heights.
Is there no sidewalk on McKnight? I mean, that doesn't go
There is
anywhere
no,
right now.
yeah, there is no sidewalk, Steve, on McKnight in that section. It's a real steep embankment. It falls off on both sides.
PennDOT has an improved sidewalks in McKnight, limited access highway.
I wasn't gonna bring this up, but since Greg just brought up the steep slope, a lot of the buffer, it will be down over the hill. And you probably won't even see it. It's sort of a waste of a lot of time and money to plan it. I don't know if you'll even see the treetops when they're fully grown. I guess maybe you will. But just wanted to point that out, that we gave them the opportunity to move those trees around, but it was blocking the restaurant. And Chris Coyne didn't want that, so he wanted it planted the way it's designed, the way it's required. But it's sort of a waste.
And one other issue that we discussed with the Planning Commission, and we do have, if there's any further discussion, we have Kathy Horan from Philo Wilkie Partnership, the architect for the project. But there was a question about would we see the rooftop units, and we actually created one more view. And this is actually taken from the rear of the strip center buildings, the 2 strip center buildings that are up on the Lowe's Plateau. You know, you have the Handel's Ice Cream, you have the Verizon store up there, you have IHOP, International House Band, although I think they changed their name, not International House Band kids anymore.
Oh, they changed it back.
Oh, they changed it back?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a ruse, okay. You can tell how often I eat there. But anyway, this view is actually taken from like right behind that parking lot that's between those 2 buildings. And what it effectively shows is you actually still will not see the rooftop units with the 4-story elevation of the building. You'll just see, and Kathy can elaborate, what's
Right.
proposed is the rooftop units are up on the roof, and we have a very nice louvered architectural element that'll screen those rooftop units. So
Yeah.
Kathy, you want to
It's a
expand
metal
on that?
screen, it's similar material and color to what's going on in the rest of the building. It goes 8-9 feet tall off of the finished roof, and the air handling units that serve the hospital and the remainder of the building will be completely enclosed and lower than the topmost panel of that screen. So those units will not be visible.
Do you want to explain the materials then?
For sure.
For the architectural guidelines.
You do?
Yeah, there is a board.
Okay, so these are a little bit more dry, not as pretty. But the flat elevations speak to the representation of materials. So the primary material here is going to be the masonry, which is mostly orange, reddish color to kind of go with what's going on in the neighborhood. We've added some darker gray. It's for some accents. That's also masonry, the dark gray that you see there. And as Greg mentioned, we're doing 4 of these buildings around, so we're trying to keep a similar palette of materials so the building is identifiable as to what it is in the different locations. With that, we have accents of a flat metal panel that is both 2 tones of gray, a light gray, kind of looks white in this rendering, and a medium gray tone there as well. The glass on the building is less than the 60% that you require. It is not a highly reflective coating on there, so it's not a mirrored glass, but it meets all the energy requirements that we have in the building code. As mentioned, the 4-story building, so our roof is a flat roof with the units on there. Everything is screened from view. The trash enclosure, I don't think that it's behind the building. It was in one of these other plans. That will have a material the same as the building, the brick enclosure with a gate on it. And we moved that down here so that it's not so close to what could be a restaurant.
I did go.
And, yeah, the other elements on the building, you know, the generator enclosure, it's all the mechanicals to serve the building are enclosed. There's nothing visible, to pedestrians or traffic coming in.
Yeah, it was mentioned at the planning commission in answer to, I think Brian Morth asked the question as to whether there's going to be any helicopter traffic, and you said no.
No.
There'd be none.
None.
Yeah, I merely mentioned that because it didn't get into the planning commission's minutes, and I just want to have a record of that stuff.
Correct.
No, it will be ambulance only, no helicopter.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Since we're on the point of aesthetics, and I had the pleasure of sitting in and watching this presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Planning Commission did a great job of reviewing the aesthetics of this project because it is our front door and it's going to be an amazing building. But could you flip that sheet or that front, to the perspective from the southbound McKnight Road again?
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that shows the parking lot there, and in the discussions, there were some conversations and some ideas just thrown out, I thought rather loosely, about the height of the fence there. And they suddenly added an 8-foot high fence in that one section. Just in the interest of aesthetics, I just want to let this council know, I would not object if the Planning Commission, upon their review, and in the minutes, they did agree to have a committee actually review and do a final fence approval. If they find that our ordinance, our 6-foot ordinance is in fact adequate and there's an aesthetic benefit to maintaining that, I certainly would not object to that. I appreciate CVS being willing to do whatever our commission felt is necessary for protection. But I can tell you, I've been on many rooftops, skyscrapers, I've crossed bridges, and in all cases, 6 foot was more than adequate for public safety. Even with Grand
You'd
Canyon.
have to be trying to get hurt if you climbed over
Yes,
a
sir.
6-foot fence.
And I just worry because it is such a prominent, it will be prominent there. And
What
I
height
think-
did they say the 8-foot
They
fence would
wanted to
become?
increase it to 8 foot when the wall height exceeded 12 feet.
So you're probably barely even
We're
talking
probably
about in that
close there.
picture anyhow.
Yeah, I'd have to.
It's
back-
left of the picture.
I can tell you,
So it-
Steve, I'll check the grading. I think that's part of the wall.
So really, that means we have two different levels of
Right now,
fence.
that's what will occur, and I think it will be
It's 13 feet.
prominent.
So,
The wall's
yeah, you'd
13
have-
feet around there, so
you'd
that
have
that would be an
8 foot
8-foot
here,
fence.
and down
right.
here, it could be lower.
Yeah, oh yeah, as you
It
go
could be
closer to the
6 feet.
restaurant, the fence comes up,
Yeah,
the
so
wall comes up
it's
quickly.
very unusual to have that.
It was
And
my
maybe
impression,
hard
it was
to
kind of
tell.
a rapid fire kind of thing, and I thought
Well, Bill,
our
your point's a
commission
good one,
wisely
because
said, let's appoint a committee
They
to
did
do a
appoint,
final
they
review.
decided to appoint a committee.
And I just wanted to make that point. I appreciate the diligence they showed in
I
this.
think Bruce Bay was looking for someone from council to be on that committee. Is it right?
I thought it should be Greg McCloskey.
Yeah,
I don't know, it looks
you
like you're
thought-
trying
you
to
thought
give it to
that,
somebody else.
I think it should be Bill.
Be an honor.
Any questions for Kathy?
Just a point of clarification, please. Looking, that's McKnight Road depicted there, right? Again, number one, in fact, there is no sidewalk, right? It's shown a sidewalk, but there isn't one.
No, there's no sidewalk, there.
Right.
That's actually just a curb.
Well, that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
there's
that's a
no
very large
sidewalk on
curve,
that.
is it?
Yeah, there's no sidewalk. on
Going
that.
straight toward the building from McKnight Road, what is encountered?
It's down an existing steep slope, the PennDOT embankment. There's a
You
drainage
asking about
channel at
now?
the bottom.
Yeah,
and
well, I
then-
mean, as
And a
projected.
slope back up, and then our wall. So it's a little bit of a valley there
there's a
between
valley
Yeah,
McKnight
you
Road and
can't
the
tell
parking
which
lot.
So you have a valley, and then the wall.
And then the wall, and then our parking lot.
Okay.
So that's what you're seeing at eye
But it
level.
almost looks as though a car could just be diverted and drive right up into the
No,
parking
there's
lot.
guide rail along that
Right,
section of
okay.
McKnight Road. There's a steep drop off on McKnight Road.
And a guide rail to prevent the thing I just alluded to, somebody inadvertently
down.
driving into the parking lot.
Correct.
There's a very wide right of way at that point also.
Yeah, okay.
This is more a question for Dusty. Ted Meinhardt, the president of the planning commission, he said on the resource protection land you offered at an off-site replacement property, and you mentioned that you were having trouble with it. And Bruce, did you want to sort of like mention the adventure property or?
Yeah, I tried to, I haven't been able to get anywhere with it. And I talked to Dusty about it before. We have a resource protection land, or there is
In
resource
West-
protection land that was previously owned by the school district and was declared resource protection as part of the Adventure McCandless Crossing. I suggested that we do something on the order of a transferable development right, which would leave it as not only resource protection, but it would possibly be converted to a conservation easement. And since the school district has a trail through it, that it would be good to turn that conservation easement over. But that was a dream, and I haven't been able to make any progress on it, but it's still a dream. Haven't given up on it, and
Where is it, Bruce?
it is,
Backside of, you know where LA Fitness?
Yes.
It's on the other side of Duncan. There's a strip of land left there between there and the school
Right.
district.
if we, if I could, if you could move that drawing over, I could point to it on the map from here. Just move.
Remove
the-
he's pointing at that.
Okay.
So what we have is the parcel we're talking about building on is right here.
Okay, right.
And
the
this
D
is,
district.
Duncan comes down through here,
Uh-huh.
and this is the parcel that we're talking about. And this was declared to be resource, and actually sort of goes like this.
Okay.
And so this is all resource protection. As of right now, you can't build anything on it. So my suggestion was,
And Kevin owns it?
Kevin
Doc-
Adventure owns it, yes.
Adventure, okay.
So I've tried to contact him regarding that and haven't been successful. We did talk about it originally, way back when we talked it, and it didn't go anywhere. So still throwing it out there as a possibility. A lot of ifs involved in it.
So we do have that, we do have the agreement with the Meads for the other property, but they have title issues, so it may not be able to be closed. But if they could meet those title issues, we would have to purchase that, if they could overcome them. But if not, we would be willing to at least talk to Adventure, Kevin Doherty, so I see the property that you're talking about. David, is that?
Mhm.
Would be willing to do that? Okay. So, yeah, so we will at least investigate that. Okay. I think the last thing was lighting. Did we talk about that?
Yeah, there was questions from the planning commission about the use of a cutoff fixture, and in your handout is the proposed fixture that's proposed. It has a cutoff within the fixture itself. It's a direct down lit lighting fixture, and the fixtures and the poles are located a sufficient distance from the property line that we do not have any light spillover.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The photometric plan demonstrates that, and it is in compliance with the ordinance requirements for site lighting.
I don't think it's in there, but it's on,
No,
it's not in there. It didn't make it in there, but
Okay.
it's on your plan.
Yeah, it's on in
It's on the
plan.
photometric.
Yeah, it's on the
Yeah,
photometric plan.
It's a downcast fixture, and I forget the pole height, 25.
25 feet.
So it's an interesting light. It actually is a series of lights underneath it. And this is the D development district has a pretty strict lighting requirement. So lighting technology continues to improve to the benefit of all of us because of the ability to focus the light, not have the backlighting, and yet provide safety for the people that are in need of it.
All right. Greg, anything else that we?
I did want to ask Kathy the height of the building, and you may have said it and I missed it. What's the
Oh,
total
yeah.
height of the building?
60 feet to the roof, plus 3.5 feet in the parapet.
That's right. And it's on the zoning cut sheet too. It's in your packet. Any other questions?
Do we need to lean towards anything as far as a 6 to 8 foot fence? Because I'm leaning towards 6, but before they finalize any plans, or?
Well, we said that we would have a committee review it, and since Greg passed that off to Bill and Ted Minor and me, and I think we can discuss it and maybe get it.
So we don't need to do anything tonight then?
So if you guys are okay with that, we'll discuss it and get it finalized. We can even finalize that after it's approved. That's not a critical issue. Did you like, just for everybody's opinion, did you like that type of fence, the classic that he showed?
I didn't have a preference other than against the Invincible.
Definitely don't want the Invincible.
No.
We will note that.
I assume you're starting the fence at 3 feet once the whole wall height gets to 3 feet, or are you starting it at 0 feet?
No, we're starting it at 0. Once the retaining wall starts, Steve, we'll have a fence. Yeah, there'll be no retaining wall that's not protected by fence.
The issue is just how high it's gonna be, the fence.
Yeah, it's
Right.
6 and then
6 or
transitions to 8.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, no, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thanks. Oh,
Why don't you take a 5-minute, can we just take a 5-minute break?
Yeah,
While
yeah.
they're getting up and
Yeah,
people are
take a
sitting
break,
up.
yeah.
5 minutes?
Thank you.
5-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Montclair Avenue, currently zoned C3 Highway Commercial District to R2 Residential, Single-Family and Two-Family Dwelling District. Let me just give you some background. At the public, on 131 Montclair Avenue is the only lot on Montclair that is zoned C3. All of the other properties on Montclair are zoned R2. C3 Highway Commercial District is a district which is primarily to recognize the existing pattern of commercial development along major highways. It is governed by Article 1331 of the Zoning Code. Section 1331.03 states that an access shall be from a collector road or an arterial road. A collector road is something like Grubbs Road or Perrymont. An arterial road is something like Perry Highway or McKnight Road. Montclair Avenue is neither a collector road or an arterial road. It is a street that ends in a dead end. 131 Montclair has a house on it built in 1910. As late as last year, it was rented out for residential use. It is currently owned by Limited Partnership 131 Montclair LP, and was purchased for $1 from Linda and Jerry Harding on October 16, 2015. 131 Montclair is classified as residential for property tax purposes on the Allegheny County Property Assessment website. The 131 Montclair is indistinguishable. It's indistinguishable from the other properties on Montclair Avenue, which are zoned R2. And my feeling is it should be rezoned from to R2 from C3. Any comments?
Yes, may
Yes,
I have
I
a
have a lot.
question. Is the owner of this property asking to have it rezoned?
No.
No.
Then why would we do it? I mean, aren't we infringing on them then?
Of course, but we don't care about that. Hey, why don't we just take all of that property? We could buy it and build a botanical center for only the residents of Montclair.
Well,
That would be
okay.
great
No,
for them, right?
Let's see.
Well, it
Any
seems like
other
that's where
questions?
you're headed.
I just think that we're infringing on the
Why don't we
person who
just keep
owns that
giving and giving?
property.
Of course, you're gonna take a,
I just
I mean,
personally,
you're both talking at the same time.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just personally feel like we're infringing on the owner of that property. If they requested it, then I could understand us looking into it, but if they're not requesting it, we could do that to
Well,
anybody's property.
That means that that property could be, a building, a commercial building could go on that property.
of course, like they bought
Well,
it.
just like, no, well, it's,
Maybe that's the reason they bought it.
no.
Well, most people buy commercial property for profit, you know that, right? I'm pretty sure I saw that
I
in my
mean,
paperwork.
you're saying
somewhere.
no, but how do you know that? You don't.
Oh, how do
really.
I know they didn't, well, that's the
Yeah,
reason.
that's what I'm saying.
The buyers, they didn't buy it, they got it for $1.
That's not right.
It's a family transition.
Well, let's, be quiet, we'll get to.
Wow.
Well, he said, you speak out of turn amongst yourselves and you expect.
Hey,
everyone to speak out of
excuse,
turn?
yeah, please me, please be quiet. Okay, let's take one at a time, okay?
Mr. Chairman, I know there's a house on the property, but is it being used for any commercial purposes now?
I do not know that. To me, it's a vacant house, and as far as I know, it's vacant since the end of 2017.
Okay.
Is
The
it-
house is vacant, we're not sure of the use actually right now.
Right.
Okay.
Is it owned by the person who owns the swimming pool place?
No, it's two different, maybe ultimately owned by the same people.
Yeah, and they use that they use that as an access, as far as I understand.
They use it as an access to what?
The rear of that lot has
The
been
rear of
used
what
for.
Wait a second, I'm asking Joanne.
The rear of that lot is being used by the swimming pool place, as I understand it.
Okay. And what did you want to add, Steve?
I was just going to say it's the same thing. My first question would actually be to Gavin. What are the legal ramifications of taking someone's commercial property and stripping it of its value down to a residential lot?
I mean, you're permitted as council to rezone property. You don't have to keep it zoned at its most profitable use. So that's a purely legal question. However, to the extent that there's certain activity going on the property now, a change in the zoning isn't necessarily going to stop current use of the property from proceeding into the future.
Doesn't the proposed rezoning significantly alter the setbacks on that property, stripping value to the current owner?
I don't know that.
Well, look at it, you have a 100-foot setback, don't you? If it's really.
Oh, if it's a C3?
Well, it's currently C3 already, right? So
Yeah, but
Right,
you
it's
change
a
the residential,
C3
it's a
now.
100-foot setback.
And what's a setback on a C3?
Yeah, Bruce, do you know what the setbacks off there?
It's 100 foot. If you're building on that property right now, it's 100 foot from all residential properties and from the street. So if you're gonna build a commercial building on that property, and I'm not sure exactly what Bill's question is, but I'm thinking that in anticipation of it being zoned R2, is your question, if
Yes,
it's
precisely.
zoned R2, does that change other setbacks?
And the answer is
Yes, it
That's what I
changes them
thought.
all
Right.
to 100 feet.
significantly changed, right?
Mm.
Well, it changes them from 10 feet to 100 feet. yeah.
Right.
Don't you think that's pretty significant?
Significant?
It's fairly significant.
I have another question, if I may, please. What is that meaning of that oblong property, or those lot lines there? Are those lot lines on the smaller portion that's depicted in the drawing, 121? Is that a separate lot?
That's why, yeah, what happened, it appears as though, and the Hoagies are here, they could probably answer that question better than me. And the second drawing I gave you was the county map, and if you look on the county map, it's outlined in red, there's a yellow line through it, it's all one lot and block. But I think the idea is that there are two, by deed, there are two properties, but for assessment purposes, it's one assessment.
So is it the same person who owns both of those?
Yes.
In the yellow?
Yes.
Same
Did you-
person?
That's the drawing that's attached to
But it's for tax purposes, it's classified as residential.
Mr. Chairman, what would the purpose have been for you not to notify the owner when you decided to bring this up for discussion?
Well, the owner, I would have to, I looked at the state, the state website, and the owner is, well, I looked at the Allegheny County website, and it was said 131 Montclair LP.
Right.
The state website does not have the owner, or does not have the owner
You're
mentioned.
saying you weren't capable of finding the owner's number or contact information when you decided to go after his property? Because I found it in about a half hour.
Oh, you find it in half an hour?
No, I was able to contact him pretty quickly when I found out about it.
Where did you find it?
I went and called the other people in the neighborhood and asked them about it. It was really easy to just, if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to go after one particular property that I don't like its zoning for, and not go, your whole stance since we've been on here is to contact everyone
Right.
within, that
but
things could
I
affect.
didn't know for sure whether this discussion was going to go on in executive session to find out whether we have a legal proceeding.
So we weren't gonna contact the owner until we found that out.
Gavin, is
Well,
there,
Go ahead.
Gavin, is there a problem with the county thinking it's one thing and we're thinking it's something else? Do those two things have to jive? Is there some rule that says that something's being taxed a certain way, it is a certain way, or?
They do not, no, the county's classification has no bearing on how the town would.
Okay, so we could have that I or anything we wanted, and they just,
And the county may eventually catch up to it, or they may not. You know, the county system is, pretty famous for not being up to date on those types of things, the assessments in particular.
Any other comments? Okay,
What's the dimension from Montclair inland to the red area there? How big a lot is that in terms of, what are the dimensions of that lot?
He's asking the depth of the lot from Montclair in,
Yes.
and I'm gonna try to pull that up as quick as I can.
I
It may
didn't
take
mention
me a
that. I know it's
second.
160 across the front.
So it's 160 by whatever the depth of the lot is.
160 on Montclair.
the lot area is 28,800
I
square
don't care
feet.
what are the dimensions?
Yeah, I don't have the dimensions.
We'll find it. It's right here.
got some big
200? I do it too quickly?
It is 160 by 200.
and that's the whole back part too, not the yellow line, the whole back part.
Should be the whole thing, right?
From Montclair to the red, right?
Distance.
And what's the setback under the current zoning?
Google says it's about 232.
What is the setback, Greg? Do you know what the setback is?
No.
10 feet
They,
now,
they
right?
said 10 feet? Did Bruce say 10 feet?
10 feet?
Yeah.
And then
Is that the setback?
Well, Bill, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. The setback on this property, if I was gonna build, if I owned the property and I was gonna build something on this property, on the part we're talking about now, is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. The, on what I've passed out, it's 100 feet from anything that's blue. And,
That's current.
and the street.
Currently, or what's it changed?
No, with right now. If I'm building on the property right now, it's 100 feet from everything that's blue on there. And it's 10 feet from everything that's red.
Okay,
So,
with
now
the zoning,
if-
if the zoning change, what does it become?
If it's changed to R2, then everything that is red, the setback becomes 100 feet from that,
So,
from
So the
that
property's
parcel.
completely worthless at that point.
yeah, I mean, it chops off, what did we say, it was 160, or 200, all the way back? It cuts more than one half the property off.
Well, what it does is it impacts the corner property, which is Prazer. It impacts the office building. It impacts Hoagie's, and it would probably impact Rule.
Could
But-
you
but it
identify
doesn't-
those by number, please?
It is 8600, 8518, 8510, and 8500 Perry Highway.
So it would affect all of those if that was rezoned.
Yes.
And I s-
If they were to redevelop.
And
So
I s-
if, for example, 8600 was building a new garage or barn back there, they would lose the back half of their property?
It'd be a 100-foot setback. I don't know what it would be.
So you're infringing on a lot of properties by rezoning it.
The whole group of properties in front on.
Again,
Yeah.
but this can support a commercial building the way it's not zoned now.
Yes.
So,
So it's, a whole street is residential.
the whole street's not residential, there's commercial
Except for the
property on it.
one, except for the one.
Well, and there's two massive commercial properties entering this street for the first 300 feet or so.
So when are people allowed to talk?
At the end.
No, wait, at the end.
Is there also any rule about having an isolated piece of zoning in one place?
You're talking about spot zoning, probably.
Yes.
Right, so the idea is you cannot create an island of property that is its own zoning district that's surrounded by districts that it's not necessarily compatible with. So it's kind of a grayish area in the law, it's kind of a case-by-case basis, there's not, boom, that's spot zoning. So there's arguments that can be made, and in this particular case, you have a C3 district surrounded by RC and an R2. But you also have a C3 district that's basically
Right
kind of
across
across the street. So, it's not clear cut, but that is a concept for sure that council would have to be cognizant of. But if the proposed change was to R2, that would not trigger a spot zoning issue.
And the other thing would be keeping this property or even changing it to RC would allow for a much more available development area for anybody if they
Well,
want
it
to buy
can't be
multiple
RC
lots.
because RC has to front Perry Highway.
Yes, but these could all be one lot.
Well,
Very
they're not.
easily. Well, they could be. It could be, that would be a much more reasonable change than stripping something from its commercial value all the way down to residential, would be to split the difference and go residential commercial and make this whole thing, have this whole thing available to make it one lot.
Okay, any other questions by comments by council? Okay, who wants to speak in the audience? Ian?
I do.
Okay.
You have to come up to the
Come up to the
mic.
microphone.
Tell them who you are, what your address is.
My name is Karen Stahl, and I live at 230 Bridge Avenue, McCandless Township. So with all due respect, Steve, because you're my friend, you're way wrong on this. So when did you guys know it was commercial?
So you gotta adjust the
You have to
council.
go, yeah, you have to talk to us, but you have to talk to the microphone.
Okay, so I want to know when the pool people knew it was commercial.
When my father purchased it back in the early 80s.
So then you lied to us. Because we were the
Excuse me,
owners.
ma'am, you have to address your comments to council.
Yeah.
You
So,
can't question.
my
other people.
mother grew up
I
there
lived there.
her whole life. She's 93.
She lived in, where, at
She lived at
131?
131 Montclair Avenue.
Okay.
Her uncle built it in 1911. Her parents bought it in 1938. She was 10 or 11 years old. She lived there until she was 19 and married my father, who was well renowned in the community. They did not buy it for a commercial price. They bought it for nearly nothing, and they let it go to hell, and they used it for the back, so all those properties were ruined. That was not what we sold it to them for. They took their existing pool company and completely ruined a residential property. And if it was commercial, why didn't she make money on a commercial property? And why did their whole life they pay residential taxes? It should definitely be a residential piece of property. Because that is not right.
It was always residential.
There was never ever a business in it, from the existing of the building.
Okay, thank you.
And Steve, if somebody was going after our property, you'd think differently about this.
Your time's
Because-
up. Sorry.
Sorry.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm Michael Gronsky, 136 Montclair Avenue. I live right across the street from that. When I moved there in 1977, April of 1977, it was a residence, and it was owned by Miss, what's your first name?
Marjorie.
Marjorie Corbel Stahl's father. He was a
Yeah.
great guy, and I was talking quite often. And I knew him pretty well, and he never ever intimated there was ever a business there, that it was ever zoned commercial. He never told me that. The time that I learned it was zoned commercial was when the Sheets people were gonna move in, or they start that whole thing, and they told me. And I was flabbergasted.
And when was that?
It was January of this year.
Okay.
So I was there for over 40 years before I found that out. Then Mr. Corbel, according to Mrs. Stahl, he sold insurance for a living. He had an office down in Oakland. That's where he sold it from. There was never ever was a commercial,
Never.
a commercial business in that house or on that property. Now, he died in 1985, so they did not buy it in the early 80s. Okay? I remember when he died there in 1985, they bought it sometime between 1985 and 1994. And according to Mrs. Stahl, they got it for a very cheap price. They wanted to get it for commercial, and they told them, no, it's residential, we've always been paying residential taxes on it. So somehow or other, a mistake was made when they put the RC zoning district in. Since that did not face 19, okay, and it couldn't be RC, and since it is on Montclair, it can't be C3. At that moment in time, that was effectively R2 by roll, just by the way you deduct things out, okay? So I'm telling you that never ever was there a business there. You can go back to 1910. Mr. Corbel's cousin built the place in 1910. She lived there from 1938 to 1946. Mr. Corbel lived there from 1938 to 1985 when he died. All during that time, it was not commercial. It was always residential, and I know it from 1977 on. I've been sitting there, and they've been renting it successfully to people, okay, whoever owns it. And we've had them, and they didn't leave until last year, or the end of last year, when they thought the sheet deal was going through. Okay, so that, to me, there was a big mistake was made whenever they did it way back when, 1994, whatever that was. I don't know when they made the RC district. All you're doing here is fixing a mistake. Okay, they bought a piece of residential property, they deserve a piece of residential property, they own a piece of residential property. That's just how it should be. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jason Moots. I live at 160 Montclair. I did want to pass out a couple photos just to stress the difference between C3 and R2. The first sheet is some other C3 properties in the area. This is equated to a Whole Foods, a Giant Eagle, a Target, real estate offices, 3-story office buildings. That is some of the other C3 in the McCandless district. Then if you flip through, there are Google Street View images of the subject property. It's a single driveway with a 2-car detached garage behind it, a stucco 1.5-story frame home. It is a house. There is no indication of any commercial signage, any commercial parking lot, any ADA accessibility parking spots, ramps, things of that nature. The lot is identical to my lot, 28 square feet. It's the same as another house on the street. It should be a residential house. We're just asking you to fix the mistake that was made. Another point I want to make too is the current owners had 3 opportunities to mark it as a commercial property, and they did not. The county asked or reassessed all properties in 2001, 2003, and 2008. During that time, they sent real estate questionnaires to every homeowner. Everybody in this room probably got one, including myself. They were asked to testify under penalty of law what the use of the property was, and if there was any material changes to what was on the county tax record and what they actually use it for. They also asked if you have air conditioning, other additions to the property. 3 times, no matter who owned that property, they had the opportunity to say, we are using it as commercial use, and they did it. So if they're going to stand up here and say they did use it as commercial use, they committed tax fraud for how many years? The other thing I did want to point out too is, I own a residential house. Why could I not come to you then tomorrow and say, I live almost catty corner from this property, I'd like to have mine zoned C3? What would you say in that situation? I feel keeping this zone C3 is opening up the town to a litigious situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Terry Huggy. I, along with my brother Ken, own the property located at 131 Montclair. It's come to our attention that you are discussing the possibility of rezoning this property at 131 Montclair from C3 back to R2. This property has been zoned C3 since 1959. I don't know who did it or how it was done at that point. I was just a young little baby. Our father purchased this property in the early 80s for future commercial use to go along with the property at 8518 Perry Highway, known as Superior Pool.
Ma'am, whoever's saying that, please stop. Only one person can talk at a time.
For years, our father rented out the duplex, top and bottom floor, and the garage, and the rear of the property was used for storing our pool equipment, trucks, and construction material. The property was sold to our sister in 2000 with the stipulation that the garage and rear property would continue to be used for storing our equipment and material, and that when she moved, the property would be resold back to our father, my brother, or myself. Our father passed away in 2015, and our sister retired and as promised, restore the property to us to extend or expand our swimming pool operations. Our plans were to tear down the house and construct a combination garage and warehouse to store and work on our vehicles and equipment over the winter inside a secure structure. If this property is rezoned to R2 as it's known, the parcel becomes useless to us. The house had been built in 1910 for years, had little or no improvements done because the house needed such extensive repairs. The structure is now beyond repair and needs to be demolished to continue. We've sat back quietly while you've had months and months of discussion regarding the Sheets deal. We are not greedy landowners that will sell to the highest bidder who have been referred to by many. We're hardworking, everyday people who are trying to carry on our dad's legacy, Superior Pools, a business that he began back in 1972. But now, as we are nearing our retirement age, as many in the community that own commercial property, we took the risk and invested in these commercial properties as an investment opportunity for our future and retirement years. I'm sure most of you worked your entire lives to get where you are with hopes that everything you've worked for will get you through your retirement years. Now you're trying to deny that opportunity by potentially rezoning this parcel. We did not seek out the Sheets deal, they came to us. The offer they made would have enabled us to purchase another newer piece of property and continue our business for the younger generation, our sons, our daughters, and our nephews who currently work there now. And for us to maybe retire comfortably. I ask you please keep the current status at C3 as it has been for close to 60 years, and do not change it back to R2, which would damage our families and diminish the value of this property by at least 75% and rendering the property useless to us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ken Hoagie, 131 Montclair, as my brother said. I am now retired, and I depend on this piece of property as part of my income for retirement. And we leased this property to Superior Pools, and we also bought this in 2015. When we did the deed transfer off of my sister, we paid $150,000 for it, and we paid the transport tax according to that. It wasn't $1. The pool store was a different story, but 131 Montclair isn't. So we did pay the transfer tax on it, and we were hoping that we could use that in our future so we could retire comfortably, and that's what we were hoping for. So this would really damage our income as far as, you know, the future and our family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd Rule, 8600 Perry Highway. And I knew the boy's father, Ken. I often acted as a mediator as they would have family arguments and whatnot. But he sat with me on more than one occasion and explained the circumstance behind that piece of property. And I do believe that you think it's residential, but it's clearly stated in 1959 that it was made into commercial property. I don't know why the taxes weren't paid, but that sounds like a collector problem, not a payer problem. You knew who owned those properties back when you were in my office. When you had a full set of sheets planned that you said you never saw at one of the previous meetings.
Pardon me?
I gave you plans when you were in my office.
Yeah.
And I think their names even listed on it, but you surely know who.
I knew from the.
You shouldn't, you
No,
tried
no,
to
no.
limit it.
No,
Bottom line.
it says on the assessment sheet, what it, 131 Montclair. Pardon?
Nobody made an attempt to contact them. I had to find out from one of your other council members when I was racing with my daughter in Indianapolis, and then I had to call these guys to make sure they were here at this meeting. You did nothing to make that happen. Your wife, beautiful woman back there, says you're a salt-of-the-earth ethical person. Seems to me you're ethical when it's convenient. Now, the setback issue is going to affect my property, because when that turns into residential, then that 100-foot rule is going to start to apply to me where it does not now. We use it as a turnaround for tractor trailers back there for deliveries and for parking. It's going to affect my retirement too. We're clear, right?
Thank you.
Susan Bronski, 136 Montclair Avenue. I live across the street from the 131. And if Sheets goes in, that's going to affect my retirement. Because I just retired, and my husband plans to retire at the end of this year. And that's my house. The value of my house is going to go down. I have 6 grandchildren. That's all we have. We worked hard for this little house on Montclair Avenue. And they're worried about their income. How much money do they already have? And they're worried about your retirement. What about our retirement? You need to think about that as well.
Thank you.
Speak again? Because I know I've got information here.
No, just one.
Good evening, Jim Van, 8779 Casa Grande. Had a lot of discussion about retirements and values and so on, which I thought we had put behind us at the last council meeting. So what we're talking about is affecting 3 or 4 businesses, 3 or 4 families versus all 18 of the people who live on Montclair. There are 2 points that I think have been overlooked here. One is that Sheets is a company with substantial resources, more than any of us have here. If they need to find another location for that store, they should be able to do that. Secondly, Sheets is not being evicted from their current location. That's never been mentioned here. They're looking to move that to their advantage. I understand that as a business person as well. But I also understand that they can stay there and probably have their lease renewed for yet another 5 years if they wanted to stay there. So I'm not quite understanding what a lot of the pressure is here that's being put on a lot of different people to make this decision. It seems to me 131 Montclair, as I drive down that street, is a residential property. It's sitting in the middle of residential property. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Rupp, and I live at 231 Montclair. My husband and I have lived on that street for 32 years, and that home has always had people in it. It's not commercial. People actually live in that home. It should be residential, just like all our other homes on Montclair. 131 Montclair needs a little bit of TLC. That was a beautiful home back then. And to tear it down, to put up their commercial stuff is outrageous. But that home is a beautiful home. It needs a little TLC, and it should stay. It should be residential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, I'm Linda Hamilton. I live at 212 Montclair Avenue. I'm at the bottom of the hill. I've lived there for 30-some years, and I have never seen any commercial business at the top of the street. It's always been residential people living there. And that's just the way it's been. Also, as far as the driveway going back next to this house and going back to their garage, there's been extensive work being done there lately. It has never been a cut-through for anything. You have never been able to enter there and go back behind those other places. It's never been open like it is now. People have been back there diligently working, and I've never seen that open before in my life, and I've lived there 30-some years. It always just went back and went to their garage, and after that it was closed. It was a mess back there. It's never, but now it's all cleaned out, so for whatever reason, it's all been cleaned out, and it does look like you could drive back there now, but it's never been that way until the last couple months. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Years.
Not there.
Hello, Pat Weber, 10518 Minor Road.
This is where the driveway.
It's disturbing as a resident of the town that the council could take targeted action against an individual property in this town that sends a message to the wider community that McCandless is not open for business and has no interest in its future business corridors. This property abuts RC properties that are going to be impacted directly by this rezoning. It depreciates the value of those commercial properties for any future redevelopment in that area. So, with respect to the residents in the area, there's still process to make sure that if development were to happen there, that it happens, with respect to the residents without rezoning this property. Because ask yourselves, what's going to happen if you rezone it R2? You're not going to force the owners to sell the property. What's the future outcome there? To negatively impact the businesses, negatively impact the businesses that already exist, negatively impact the future development in that area, and leave yourself with blighted properties along Perry Highway and that property on Montclair. Would it be nice to rewind things and put the zoning the way maybe everybody would have liked it to have been from the very beginning? That would be nice, but that's not where we're at now. So we could try to force it to become residential, but you're not going to force it to become a developed property. You're not going to realize anything beneficial out of that for the future of the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I moved there in 1938, on the left side of the road,
Please identify yourself.
that was
ma'am.
not a hill.
She can't hear.
Mr. Peters and his
Marjorie
family
Stalls.
moved there.
You need to identify yourself, please.
Say who you are.
Say who you are. For the record, that's.
Mr. Peters and his family moved there.
Yeah, she cannot hear.
Her name's
you.
Marjorie Stahl. We got it.
I understand, thank you.
And they had a lovely home, and they had a little building with a windmill and a beautiful pond up there. And I was really shocked when they took that hill down, and then they had that commercial building there. And of course, on the other side was Mr. Stokey. He was a justice of the peace. And then we had all the neighbors, McDonald's and everybody. And it was really nice, and my parents always kept it under control. And when I seen it the last time, they just let I guess the renters moved out, and they didn't take care of the roof or the shingles or anything up there. And I was really shocked about it, because we always took care of it. Thank you.
No, she has her notes. She can't hear. She'll show you reading notes.
And I think it all should be residential. I think it should be R2. It was always residential. Nobody had businesses or anything there. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay. The zoning committee meeting is hereby adjourned.
Call to order the Finance and Personnel meeting. First of all, I want to make a couple of announcements, and that is, this is for council. to say that the annual COG dinner is going to be September 20th, 2018 at Holy Trinity Center. So if you are interested in attending that, please let Marie know. As well as the Allegheny County and Western Pennsylvania Association of Township Commissioners. That conference is September 27th through 30th at Seven Springs. Also, please let Marie know about that. Okay, next order is presentation of report by Manning and Napier and ANCO Consulting on the second quarter investment performance of the town's uniform and non-uniform deferred benefit pension plan. Dave. They're dead.
There he is.
You're up.
It's Justin's last
Who would you like to go first?
It doesn't matter.
You choose yourself.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good evening. Just want to give a brief update on performance since our last meeting when we addressed the fourth quarter performance of 2017. Since then, if you turn to page 21 of 42 on the report that I just handed out. The assets have grown to $15,588,000 in the account, and if you turn to page 23, two pages later, you'll see that our investment return for the year-to-date through June 30th was 2.15% before fees, 1.94% after fees, a good 1.5% higher than the plan's benchmark and the market equivalent benchmark of 0.05%. The second quarter was also, both the first and the second quarter we beat our benchmarks, and so the second quarter report here is also 2.1%, 2% return over 1.63 and 1.08% return. If you're familiar with the markets this quarter, so far this year, fixed income returns have been negative as interest rates have gone up. The market's return, the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index, lost about 1.6% over those first 6 months of the year. The bond portfolio in our account only lost 1.3%, so we had a little value there. On the stock market has been a lot more volatile so far this year, but has recovered for the most part since its downturn in the first quarter. But it's only up about the S&P 500 was only up 2.65% through June 30th. The stocks in our portfolio were up 8.02%. So that's where we've added the value both by protecting a little bit on the bond side where we didn't lose as much as the rest of the market, and by owning very good stocks and having good stock selection that led to significant outperformance on the stock side. If you turn back to page 21, you'll notice on this with this pie chart that we were at about 47% stock, and the remainder 53% in bonds and fixed income. So we have over the last several years we've been slowly reducing our equity allocation. As stocks have done well, we've been taking gains and moving them over to the bond side of the portfolio where we feel they'll be relatively better protected should the market at some point, this bull market come to an end after going into its more than 9 years. And with signs that stocks are fairly expensive, our process has led us to say, it's time to lighten up a little bit and be very cautious about where the positioning the portfolio is. Despite that caution and despite the fact that we could have had a better return if we had more in stock, we're very pleased with the returns. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions. Very good. I'll let Justin report on the comparison of our returns to the rest of the universe.
Hopefully everyone has a copy of our report.
I saw it online, but
Okay.
I don't have a hard copy.
Okay. I'll just summarize then sort of what's in the report. Dave touched on recent performance. He mentioned asset allocation, about 48% in the equity market. What I wanted to show you, if you have the report or access, on the third page, we do show you sort of the historical asset allocation for Manning and Napier in the total fund, and you would actually see that reduction in equities over the last several years, hitting about a high of 65-ish% back in 2014. As the market has moved up, you'd actually see the percentage of your total fund assets moving towards a more conservative asset allocation, with now a slight underweight to equities with your target. That was page 3. But then performance on page 9. So we don't just show you the performance against benchmarks, we also show performance versus a peer group of representative portfolios. We also break out the portfolio performance by the various different asset classes: domestic equity, international equity, and fixed income. Dave touched on the total performance for the quarter, 2.15. The universe ranking relative to other public plans of comparable size would have been in the 4th percentile. So that means your fund return, or Manning and Napier's return, was outperforming the vast majority of the peer group. And then you can see that 2.16% year to date in the 1st percentile. So the first 6 months of this year, Manning and Napier in the total pension plan outperforming all other public plans in this universe. The 1-year return, 7%, outperforming the index, but you'll notice that 68th percentile in the peer group, so slightly underperforming the median return, which is closer to 8%. Again, that's on account of the shift into the more conservative asset allocation. That has been a headwind to relative returns. We see a lot of other pension plans with the 60, 65% equity allocation. Keep in mind, you're now at about the 50% allocation, and the markets have gone up. So they have added value recently after they underperformed for 2-3 years, the 2014 to 2016 stretch. Last year they outperformed. This year the total fund is outperforming. And if you can see what's driving a lot of this outperformance is when you look at the domestic equity performance for Manning and Napier, 8.8% in 2018 versus 3.22 for the Russell 3000, or 2.65 for the S&P 500. Over the last 12 months, a 20.5% return, about 5.75% better than the benchmarks. And on a relative basis, basically top quartile performance versus all time periods now, as the domestic equity portfolio has really rebounded after a few years of underperformance, outperforming the benchmarks over all time periods. And then the strength of the portfolio going back to 2003, 12.39% versus the market benchmarks about 9.5%. So on an annualized basis, about 2.78% of outperformance. Then you can see that the international equity portfolio has not done as well as domestic equity, so that's worth keeping an eye on. Although domestic equities are a much larger allocation and have been driving the stronger returns recently. And then fixed income, Dave mentioned outperforming the index over the year to date as fixed income returns are negative 1.18 for Manning. The benchmark down 1.62. But you can see the median intermediate duration portfolio is only down 0.84. So Manning's actually underperforming the peer group median over that time period. And really you have to go out several years before you see Manning and the peer really outperform or do well in the peer group with fixed income. So really it's the domestic equities that have been much stronger component for the total plan lately in Manning and the peer. And then I'll just wrap up on page 11. And really I'll just summarize maybe the first and last paragraph. But the first paragraph, it speaks to the recent improvement in performance as well as the outperformance for the total plan over longer term 10-year plus time periods, but still trailing the policy index over 3 and 5 years. But we have made up some ground after the 2014 to 2016 stretch. Again, those 3 years are still impacting some returns, but we have seen the rebound in performance. And I'll point out that the total fund has outperformed the policy now in 7 of the last 9 quarters. So we finally have seen the rebound that we were hoping to see. We thought we wanted this 2016 performance started to improve, but then one difficult quarter kind of threw a wrench in that. But 17 and so far year to date, they have been a very strong investment manager. So at this time, we wouldn't recommend any changes. Just keep in mind that they have shifted to a slightly more conservative asset allocation. So if there is a market correction, your fund should do relatively well on at least on a peer group or relative basis compared to other plans.
When you say market correction, you mean a decrease in what?
Just in equity markets, yes.
Yeah.
So based on the performances of 14 through 15, we took your recommendation to closely monitoring Manning and Napier, and we decided the way to do that was to bring them in quarterly and have these reports. It looks to me that things are doing well and that whatever adjustments they made are working. If council agrees, I would be comfortable with them coming in, if you think that's all right, with them coming in twice a year instead of quarterly for these.
Sure. I think that was standard practice when there were less concerns with the portfolio. So we have other clients that meet just with managers on a semi-annual basis as well. So I can support that, and if necessary, we'll come in more frequently. But I'm willing to recommend to council that we can go back to the sort of the twice a year schedule.
I agree with that point of view. In light of the performance of the last quarter, substantial improvement, I think it's fair to characterize it, do it twice rather than 4 times.
Everybody's good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, then let's do that.
All right. Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The next on the agenda is discuss the selection of appointees to the Environmental Advisory Committee. I haven't actually done it like this before. As the liaison to that committee, I would like to recommend that we keep Ken Allhouse, Ward 1. He's done a great job, he's a good worker, and he is the only one who applied for Ward 1. Same thing with David Meinert. He is in Ward 3, which we had many applicants in, and he has done just a really terrific job. And I would also recommend that working with him that he stay. I would also recommend is taking one of the, since there were no applicants for Ward 7, to take one of the Ward 3 applicants and put them in that spot.
Madam
Yes.
President, may I make a comment?
Sure.
So I know we discussed this last meeting, and I hadn't had a chance to review it, so I was silent. But I did have a chance to take a look at the appointment policy. I'd like to just offer something for consideration, some thoughts. When I looked at the appointment policy that was passed in, I think, 2017, item 2 does say applications will be accepted at any time for any position. It also speaks to the vacancy being posted for 30 days. But nowhere in the actual appointment policy does it speak to a cutoff period. Now, I only raise this because this will be a full 4-year appointment. And when I looked at the policy, the resolution forming the EAC committee, it was clearly an intent to, as best as we could as a council, diversify that membership. And so I would just ask for some consideration, some thought, since we have clearly a six-member board committee, there's no immediate need to appoint another person. I would like to consider best efforts in maybe reopening the 7th Ward to see if in fact we could find someone to position that. And I certainly will go along with the majority of this council in their feelings, but I want to, because it's a 4-year position, we would be not having any representation from the 7th Ward for that entire 4-year period. And again, I didn't see any appointment policy necessarily anything, unless I'm missing it, there's nothing that requires a definite deadline that we're adhering to here. And I understand policies and things, so I'd like other thoughts maybe on that.
This comes about because you knew somebody who wanted to join after the deadline.
We knew the gentleman put his application in, just as another gentleman, Mr. Bottai, put his in. He said literally from the beach when he happened to see on the website. And so, understanding that, that's why I'm just asking for some consideration. I don't know how that individual that was applying would interview or anything. I'm suggesting that maybe we extend the process for the 7th Ward.
Not just to him.
No, exactly. No, I'm not suggesting.
No, I
just
knew
to
it was
him.
I understand that.
Yes, sir. That's all I'm saying. Just to try and meet the spirit of the ordinance or the resolution forming the EAC. That's all.
And when we set it up, it was to have someone from each ward.
There is language, though, expressly stating that if no one's available, that we would appoint someone. And so I recognize.
What ends up happening, though, in my mind with that, and I don't necessarily have a big problem with it, but in every single situation, somebody could go back and go, oh, nobody else even applied for that from my ward. I want to do it now since there's no other applicants. And then we have to re-interview, start the whole interview process over every single time somebody says that if we start making precedent. Which doubles our efforts on this part.
The intention of this appointment policy and how it was written was so that we would have a closure date. And from the time we posted it, our intention was for it to be open for 30 days. And then we didn't want to keep boards with vacancies, especially when there's people, wanting to fill them. And while we wanted to keep those available, the point of putting in an application at any time means that these people can put in applications now for any board without a posting. And then whenever that comes, in case they miss the posting, whenever that position comes up, they'll be notified. So that was the intention behind, or someone from the EAC could put in a application, and then if someone had to resign, their application would still be active for them to be considered. So I feel like we definitely need to have limits on And I think if we start, oh, nobody showed up, like Steve said, and so let's run it again, I think that was not our intention. That was not our intention here.
May I
I think
ask
if I may make a
question?
quick,
Yes, sir.
very quick,
Sure.
I essentially agree with what you said, Councilman Kirk, but the question is whether the aim of having diversification and representation from all 7 wards, I think fairly trumps this somewhat arbitrary consideration of having a 30-day period to, to submit the application. I think that's really all it is. Which is more important to us? I mean, do we want everybody from the 3rd ward or the 1st ward or whatever it happens to be? I don't think that gets the kind of diversification we want.
Well,
Then we need to change the policy.
I would ask that we add some clarity to the policy so that it's clear that the applications received or on file at the end of 30 days would be interviewed. It's just, there is some, it doesn't speak to cutting off. In item 2, it talks about accepting them at any time. In item 3, it talks about a 30-day advertisement period. But there's no suggestion as to how any applications are treated prior to or after that 30 days. And so clarity would be wise. Let me ask, I wasn't involved in the process, I don't know how many applications of interest for people volunteering in the community are, but were there any other individuals who had applied to the town for other boards and authorities from the 7th Ward that we could have reached out to and asked them if they had an interest in serving on the EAC? Was that done? Or did we just limit it to EAC member applications?
EAC member application. Now,
Okay.
some people, when they apply, they'll put in an application and then say, I'm interested in this board, and this board, and this board, and this
Or
board.
they say any board.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
those people, but if they specifically say one board.
Just one board,
Then no,
then
we don't
we
call them
limit
and
it
say,
to that.
hey, are you interested in another board?
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Question. Thank you.
So this
By the
is-
way, the applicants we received from Ward 3 are all excellent and highly competent.
From all
And
wards.
my comments
Yeah, we always
were
read
in
good
no,
applicants.
were in no
Yeah.
way reflecting that we did not have
Actually,
good
on
people
all
to choose from.
all committees.
Yes.
Yeah, we've
So,
got a ridiculous amount of
Okay, just let me just
good choices,
say that. Okay.
which makes it even harder to start saying, well, you're a great choice, but we're going to reopen this for interviews.
And I agree with you, Kim, with the 2 that are already on, that I think
Yeah, it's
they
hard
should
to-
be reappointed. They were very impressive with their interviews.
They're very impressive on the committee. So what do you think, or do you wanna change the, committee? I think the other can of worms is if we open and extend this, there are gonna be other people who would say, well, I would have applied for this if I would have known that it was just, could be extended.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you make this fair, having unlimited.
And the deadlines,
That's our
Sliding
intention.
deadlines.
That was our intention in writing this, is that there was a 30-day deadline to get your application in.
Well, if you go with that, and I'm not saying either way,
Yeah.
but if you go with that, I agree with Bill, that we do need to reword that.
Just add some
Because
clarity
you
for the
weren't here when
future.
you wrote it. So
Right,
if you
and
only
add
wrote
some
it, so
clarity
I wasn't
to
here,
it,
right,
right.
yeah. Okay.
So do we need to look at making that more clear then, and make some changes, make some amendments to that? Do you have a suggestion, or do we bring it up another time and look at it, or?
We'll do it at another
Well,
time,
if-
since it's so late.
Yeah,
It's
given
so
the
late,
hour,
why-
I would
Yeah.
Do it at another
fine with
time.
visiting
Yeah, we
that.
got enough to do here.
Yeah, we have.
But
Okay.
just a quick comment, maybe Bill, Kirk, if you have a suggestion you could jot down
I will.
to give us a gap, but the way we've done this is Tucker Aaronsburg and I have helped
We kind of wordsmith it together, yeah.
collaborate and then get it to the EAC liaison and council president, and just after that, and distribute to all. That's been our protocol.
Are we saying this could result in a retroactive change in the criteria?
No.
We're not.
No, I accept the criteria, I understand the need for cutoffs
It
and
would be,
deadlines.
prospective then only, is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes. No change.
So do we need to decide on the third person, or don't we do that tonight?
No, I would think at this point, this is before we've changed everything.
Of
We've
course.
already made the 30 days.
Right, right.
So this
That's what I'm
tonight's the
saying.
third
Should we
person.
decide on someone from
I would
those that we
think.
interviewed? Or don't we do that tonight?
Well, we're deciding to vote on it for next.
Right,
We've
we're-
got
2 weeks.
We have
Right.
two that do the chairman as.
Right, we
the
have two that
president
we're
as
looking at
identified.
keeping.
Right, those two.
So we
Does
only
anyone
need-
else have
We
a
all need one more.
preference?
You need one more, right?
Right,
And we're saying that the gentleman who was a late filer is excluded.
can file
from cons-
next time, right?
Yeah, excluded from consideration. Okay.
While there were very qualified individuals, all of them, it was very difficult to choose from, but one did stand out to me, just because I've worked with this person, that's Dewana Alfonsi. I've worked with her on the steering committee, and she did some really great work engaging the community and getting people involved.
And she does always jump ahead, or jump up and
She
raise her
set
hand
up a
down.
lot of things to really get community involvement, and that's one of the big things in the EAC, is to get people involved. And so I really liked, the work that she's done on the steering committee. So, while it's difficult to choose, she seems to have a good way of getting people involved.
Well, I'd like to throw another name in, is that Roger, how do you say, Body? Body?
He, I think pronounces it Bodi.
Body. I kinda like, just to throw out there.
So then we
I'm sorry.
have 4 names to bring up on the 27th. Correct? We can't vote on them
Well,
now,
we bring
so-
up, you have to bring up one, and then you vote.
Right.
Yes or no.
So we
yes,
have
no,
2
yes
that
or
we're
no.
going to bring up for sure.
Right.
Right.
And then 2.
As
that-
long as everybody else is in agreement with those
Right.
two.
Well, I didn't
Yeah.
hear any complaints, that's why I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So we'll have a blank, right, on the
Yeah.
agenda then? And
So what is the sequence? How mechanically, what do we do? We take the first 2 that, I don't think there's a controversy
start with
about.
the
vote
only-
them.
Right, I would say the
Well,
ones that
Well, you-
are agreed upon would be the starters.
If you'd like, we can list the names now. I mean, see, I think we're in public discussion here. I think you're gonna list Mr. Allshouse and Mr. Minard's name, but then the third blank would be filled, third seat would be filled by
Does some-
someone making a motion, and whoever's making that motion would be, and then
Does somebody
you
wanna
vote on that. So it's up to the
Recommend, does somebody wanna choose one, or Allhouse or Minor?
Oh, yeah, I mean.
Those two were in
those two are
agreement.
in.
I'm saying, does somebody, who wants to bring up the motion?
We'll do that at the agenda meeting.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
decide
we
that at the
can- we'll get
agenda
that,
meeting.
We'll do that next week.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought we
next
could
week.
just add that and now and get it over with.
We will, I'll have that on the draft agenda for next week, and then have a blank for the third seat, and then a motion would be made.
Yeah, for our agenda review.
We'll vote up or down for the people.
Right.
Go in some kind of sequence.
Anything else about the appointees?
Okay, that's okay.
The checklist, checklisting bills number 8 dated July 14, 2018 through August 8, 2018 totaling $995,968. That should be a period. And 98 cents as submitted to each member of council and posted on the bulletin board. Anybody have any questions about, any of that stuff? What do we do with our HVAC? I thought we were, we got almost $3,000 more thrown into that.
Those are bills that we had held, are gonna pay. We are in the process of terminating the use of the current vendor, Reno. And Reed Ebner has gone through an RFP process to find an HVAC consultant. And Reed, if you wanna comment briefly, where we stand with that.
We reached out to 3 engineering firms and got proposals from 2 of them to actually do a review of all of our HVAC here in the Public Works building and make recommendations, including cost of any changes they would see that would provide us with energy efficiency, and also calculate what the savings would be. And they will also recommend 3 potential maintenance companies to take over maintenance of all of our HVAC in the future. And we'll be signing proposal with one of those firms in the next few days and moving the ball forward on that.
Okay, we won't see that.
We can share that gladly. I did report that we were in the search.
Right.
We can show you the results of those by all means. I mean, it's something that ordinarily,
Yeah, just keep us informed,
you
so
bet.
we know what we're talking about.
Okay, we can,
$100 or $100,000.
No, it's, the two prices were 5,500 and 7,800, and the third did not give us a response to the RFP. But why don't we just put those in a packet? I'm gonna put
I
that in
guess
my
I
manager's
meant
report.
what they said we needed done.
Oh, by all means, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
I didn't mean like the guys who make this.
Yes, we wouldn't spend any money until we talked about what they were recommending.
That's gonna be a big
It's gonna
potential.
be a big one.
Could be a
Right, that's
potential
what
big
I-
deal if we
okay.
wanna make some changes to the
Alright.
systems, we have some
Right.
inefficiency. I think it's a great opportunity for us
Okay,
to do this.
thanks.
Yes.
I also noticed, of course, I know it's summer and we got a lot of vehicles on the road, but we got a lot of parts. We got $12,000 in parts. I added them all up. Are there things we need to replace? What's wrong?
I didn't know if there's a particular large one, a large repair on any of the equipment.
There's just a lot of them. There's a $5,000 one.
There you go.
There's a $5,000 one on 11407, but there's like a $1,000 one, 120, another $1,000. I just didn't know. Are these some things, is this the same stuff breaking? Are these things we need to replace?
It kind of hits in peaks and valleys. When we have, the larger equipment can have a huge part, one big part could cost a lot. And,
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the parts budget is overall, but, so I don't know how we can comment on how that relates. We
Okay.
can get back to you on that.
Just seemed like a lot of things breaking, our parts. Anyone else have any other comments on the bills? Okay, notification of a letter of resignation as a member of the zoning hearing board has been received by Ken Cuccinelli, effective August 31st, 2018. Any comments about that? We'll vote at the business meeting to accept his resignation. And then, once we do that, then we post that for 30 days.
I would add that Ken is in my district, and I identified him as a potential member way back when the decision to add someone was made. I think he's done a very good job, and I think there'll be uniform agreement on that. He's moving to Florida, though. He and his wife have sold their home and are heading south.
Toby, with the, I know there's a zoning hearing board hearing at the next Thursday, I believe, for that get-go. I think Bruce is trying to get an alternate to sit in on that. Do you know if he's had any success with that?
Yes.
Okay, great, because obviously Ken's not gonna be, be able to help with the decision and the vote ultimately, especially if it gets postponed, so.
Who is is Tom Edwards?
Tom Edwards.
Tom Edwards is the alternate.
I believe that's who Bruce
Right.
confirmed. I know Bruce was intending to contact Tom Edwards and had made contact, and I think that has been confirmed.
There's also another alternative.
We do have a second alternate.
And that's the reason I think all alternates, whether the personnel or whatever, should be at the meetings for just these events. Because that's been going on for a long time. And to catch up on that, I think is really hard. That's why I don't see why the alternates don't attend the meetings.
Well, with respect to the zoning hearing board, I think both the alternates are lawyers that deal in this matter, zoning. So unless it's a really unusual case like the Seavest, these run-of-the-mill fence variances are really it's too simple for them.
Oh,
Who are you saying, sir,
Okay.
is a lawyer? Tom Edwards is definitely not a lawyer.
He isn't?
No. And the other gentleman, who's the other alternative?
He's the other gentleman is the one you,
Ken, who's
Yeah.
Ken Cuccinelli, who's.
no, but he's the other gentleman that you motioned for.
But who was that? That's what I'm
I
trying to.
can't remember.
Dick Halloran's a lawyer.
Yeah, Dick Howard's a lawyer, and the other fellow is, the other alternative's a lawyer.
Oh, the fellow that's the Cranberry solicitor.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't remember his name.
I
right
can't
now.
remember.
I didn't.
I
have the list.
can't remember his name either, but he is an attorney. He's really sharp.
Okay, any public comment on any of these
Comment.
agenda items?
Brian Moore, Cumberland Road. I don't mean to drag this out or anything, but I think there's one thing that you should consider on your appointment for the EAC. Why only choose from Ward 3? You should be looking back at all candidates that have been interviewed that were not picked previously. So if there's any, Marie can probably come up with a list of all those.
I think we did, but I think
Yeah.
5 of them are from Ward 3.
We do.
And we have the list.
Every person who has submitted an application for 2 years are pulled and asked to interview. Everyone who's filled out an application for the EAC for the past 2 years, that's how long we keep them.
But some of the terms, well, in other words, some of the awards were presented before that.
It's our understanding that the application process is, when it opens up, we take applications for that period. If someone had reapplied for maybe multiples or an EAC position, I don't believe we've gone back, or you have, Marie, gone back to look to see who was interested before. We're looking at who's interested. I thought the process is who's interested is responding during that 30-day period.
No. But see, you're limiting.
That wasn't
Right,
what I
I
I'm not
understand that.
limiting anything. I am just trying to.
No, but that was the whole point of applications being taken any times, is that applications will remain active for 2 years. Do we
Right.
put it? No, it should be.
Is that under?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
if
that's what
you
we're
guys are
supposed to,
comfortable
that's
with
what
it
we're
that way.
supposed to be doing. That was my understanding, that we were supposed to be doing, is we were keeping applicants, that's the reason you can submit it any time. Because you can submit it now for the next time it comes up, and it's good for 2 years. That's what
But the
I see.
appointments
said.
are for
You remember
4
that?
years.
I see, no, I see it. Applications will be
various
kept on
boards
file
may
at
not
the town
be-
hall for up to 2 years from the day
Yeah,
you receive it.
yeah, it's on here, so that's what we need, that's
Okay.
what we should be doing, thank you.
So should we contact those people or no?
Well, we certainly need to see if there's somebody from Ward 7.
We better look and see if
Yeah,
there's
right.
something.
We
May I-
need to do, if there's somebody from
That
Ward
was my
7.
questions. were-
Definitely.
Yeah, yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's
Yep.
great.
Good
Yep.
point, Brian.
Yeah, that's right, mhm.
Thank you for.
I thought that was actually done.
I did too.
Yeah, I thought that was
I
something
did
we
too,
were already
that's the
doing.
reason I answered him and said, that's what we're doing. Any other public comment? Okay, then the Finance Personnel Committee is adjourned.
Call to order the Services Committee. And
They missed the public safety.
oh, I'm sorry. I was ready to go. I apologize.
Steve's vice chair of public safety.
That's it.
Sorry, Steve.
There.
Call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting. I see the chief's not here, but I assume we have Jeffrey Basil here to fill in for him.
Do my best. Good evening. Sergeant Basil, pinch hitting for Chief DeSanti. 2 things I just want to bring to light. In the month of July, we had 9 of our officers attend an active shooter training hosted by Hampton Police Department. The significance of it is that each surrounding department sent officers each day, so that our office, it happened as it would in real life. You know, if we have an active shooter in one of the schools, you know, McCandless may have 3 officers working, Ross might send 3, Northern Regional 3, so forth. So it gave our officers the opportunity to train and sort of work out the bugs if that should happen. So it was an excellent training, and it was 5 days. We were able to send a total of 9 officers. And the second thing, I'm sure that you have in your packet, with John Bojarski's help, we've implemented the traffic complaint form, which is fillable from the Town of McCandless website. You can access it from the police page. You know, it's various drop-down boxes. What's significant about that is this is one of our major issues that we respond to every day. Neighbors will call, the stop sign at Willoughby and Ryland, people are running it all the time. We'll send officers over there for, a week, they'll sit there, stop cars, so forth. We really never had a way to track it, but we do now, so we, 5 years from now, if somebody would call in and use that intersection, we could pull this up and say, well, we had a complaint 5 years ago, our officer sat there, we issued 1 citation, 10 citations, what have you. So I think it's gonna be a very valuable tool that we can go back to show the residents. So that's it for me.
I love the idea.
I thought it was great too. So.
Excellent. Good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sergeant, where is that? Is that in the packet we received?
I believe it is.
Yeah. Is it? I didn't see it in there, that's why I wondered.
I can pass it on, you can all take a look at it. But you can go on the website.
It's on the website, you
tonight.
can find it there, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's ready to
easier
go.
to do it on the website.
Yeah, well, here, may I give this back to you?
Sure.
We'll proceed to look on the website, thank you.
Thank you.
Notification of police officer promotions and swearing in of 1 new officer is scheduled to take place in the council's August 27th, 2008 regular business meeting. If there's no questions on that, we'll open up any public comment for the public safety. And it does not look like we have any public comments, so the Public Safety Committee meeting is adjourned. Now, Bill.
Now you're on.
I'd like to call to order the Services Committee meeting and ask for Chief Stack, Fire Marshal Stack, to give his report.
Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Try to get us out of there. Appreciate that. As you saw in the report, this is for the month of June. The 3 companies are continuously training. Another very busy month for the 3 companies. We ran a total of 68 calls, bringing us a year to date of 390. So we're pretty busy with a pretty mixed bag of different types of calls. Just a real quick comment that last Friday, August 10th, was our 20th annual golf outing. We had a fantastic day. Weather held off for us just with the nick of time, and we had quite a few people show up. I think we had 128 golfers, and a number of council members were able to come up for dinner. I appreciate seeing them.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was nice to see everybody up there. So again, I want to thank council on behalf of the 3 fire companies for your support. It was well worth it. The next important date for the step-up information would be for the appreciation dinner banquet. That's the 8th of December at the Chadwick. So you can mark your calendars for that. Under department training and certifications, myself and the chief, we attended our quarterly update training at the county EOC. Also, the fire companies are currently training with their high-rise operations in the last 2 weeks. Currently, the chiefs and line officers are attending incident command training over the weekend of August 25th and 26th. Other than that, if you guys have any comments or questions, and within the report, I'd like to take them out. If not, please let me know.
Any questions from council members? Hearing none. Any question? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stack. Any public comment at this time on the services report? Hearing none. Services Committee is adjourned.
Call to order Public Works Committee. Review the North Hills Council of Governments bid tabulation for cured in-place pipelining services, 2018-19 sanitary sewer rehabilitation specifications. Please note Wayne Roller, NHCOG Executive Director. The word revised on the Jet Jack Inc. bid points out the revised price submitted on its bid. Jet Jack is the lowest responsible bidder for the pipes 15 inches to 36 inches. Institute Form Technologies LLC, and the lowest responsible bidder for pipes 8 to 12 inches.
Councilman Mertz, question? The revised price is the submitted price. Can you you know what happened there?
I do.
In, with the
I
in-situ
talked to Wayne Roller
form
from the
pipe
COG,
there?
what his comment is that, the actual bid form is, which is in your packet, the bidder lined out and initialed his price when they opened up their envelope, that's the way the COG received it.
He just changed
He
it.
had made a mistake, instead of redoing his bid page,
Oh,
lined it
okay.
out and
Yeah.
initialed, that's
And
it.
he
He
initialed
didn't
it.
change the price or anything, okay.
Well, he
No.
did change the price,
the
but
price.
not after.
Not
But not
after,
after,
before.
Right.
before, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And this Jet Jack is a company that Mark Sabina, who's returned to work today, commented to me that he would like to talk to Wayne Roller and the COG engineer just to see how they've been vetted and make sure that they're able to perform. Their price is somewhat lower than the other two. So if there's any negative report, we'll certainly give that to council by next week.
Because we go for the lowest responsible bidder.
Yes,
Just not
and,
the lowest
and,
bidder.
and this adjustment was a math error because the price went up.
Which
And
was
we're still-
corrected, which was corrected
Corrected
before the
by,
due date.
it's in a sealed bid, it's in a sealed bid, that contained that line up.
Okay, got it.
And
Thank you.
apparently he made a math error, oh, yeah, what did I do, or whatever he did, but I asked the COG director specifically, is that what happened? He said that is.
He corrected
you.
it
He
before
corrected
the
it
due date.
beforehand, yes.
Before it was submitted, actually. I
Yes,
see, now
yes.
I got it.
They opened it up and you go, oh, this
You know,
guy's got a line on
you
it.
understand my questioning,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jamie,
Okay.
I have a question, if I may, relative to the Mark Sabina. You said he returned to work today?
Mhm.
How's he doing? Is he fully recovered? Is he still a little bit?
He is in
affected by
therapy
the-
for his wrist, and he's able to do paperwork now and check things, not do a lot of writing, but fortunately his orthopedic doctor released him on Thursday. He had a therapy appointment Friday, and he's using therapy, taking his brace on and off.
Good.
Well, why isn't he at this meeting?
Because I didn't think he'd have that much to add after just coming back and trying to figure out what the heck's going on in Public Works
Okay.
building after a couple of months, almost 2 months.
He's been here since 6 o'clock in the morning, right?
He got here from like
Come-
6
Came
o'clock
at 6
this
o'clock
morning.
in the morning. It's a long day for the first day back.
I think you were kidding us.
Yeah.
It was.
Oh, you were kidding? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah,
I tried to give you a
didn't
straight
know you were
answer.
kidding. Sorry about that.
I did my best to give you a straight answer.
All right. Report that PennDOT has sent the town a replacement Exhibit C enhanced minimum wage provisions for new winter maintenance agreement signed after July 1st, 2018.
It's a PennDOT bureaucratic email.
Right.
It was sent to the council president.
And basically, they said that you that you have to pay your people who take care of the snow removal a certain wage.
And they had given us the old page
Right.
in our, the version that they sent us. And it arrived here on July 2nd, was stamped and received. So we used the old page, and then and we submitted it to them. They said, in the mail here, you should have the new page. So this is just putting us on notice. If we do use somebody on a wage rate outside of our public works department, it would be, they have to be paid at least $12 an hour instead of 10 something an hour. So the $10 minimum price went up. So, Kim, would you want us to respond and copy you, or do you want to respond?
What do we need?
They want an email back.
Oh, we have to send, I didn't realize that we need to, I thought they just told us. I didn't know we responded. Yeah, just send it on the
Yeah, we
town
got it.
letterhead. Yeah, we got it, we agree, we'll do it,
Yes,
please.
thank you.
Jackson, check.
If I need to sign it, I will, whatever.
Anything anyone needs to add for the Public Works activity report, Toby?
No.
Anything anyone needs to add for the report in 2018 paving program?
Just quick comment, after talking with Mark today, he's picking up where we,
It's on the 29th.
Bill's got it.
Tuesday?
What, Bill, what,
The paving program has begun, and it has, we're on North Florence and moving over to Hazel tomorrow. And after that, Mark is going to work with the paving company to pick up where we left off in his absence, set up the rest of the schedule.
Anybody else have any comments?
One quick thing, if I may, the activity report, the Reichhold Road, we have doubled our efforts to finish Reichhold Road because that's been very difficult for both citizens and users of the road as well as the crews because of the turns and so forth that Reichhold takes. So we were able to move our second crew up there after finishing Hazel, which is the next road to be finishing the drainage work. So we expect that for everyone here, especially Kim, since that's your ward, by Friday to be done, weather permitting. Hallelujah.
Not that it's ours, but since we're talking about public works anyhow, any word on Rochester?
I was just gonna ask the same
It's
question.
supposed to open up, PennDOT gave us notice
End
by
of
the end of
this week,
This
but
week.
is there, that's still
Is
where
it
we're
true?
at?
That's a weather permitting, as long as if that's.
Today was not
Oh, I
very
know.
weather permitting.
I've had a lot of people asking, when are they opening it?
Yeah,
Yep.
they were optimistic that they would be done. I think they had an extra day or two in their schedule for that, for the weather.
Any more questions from council? Any questions from the two people in the audience? Hearing that, we'll close the Public Works Committee meeting adjourned.
I'd like to call to order the Recreation Committee. I'd like to discuss the potential relocation of the town's war memorial from its present location on Memorial Drive and Route 19, Perry Highway, to land owned by the town along McCandless Drive at Blazer Drive.
Okay, so I don't know why. Do you?
Well, Toby, I'm gonna let you answer that because I asked the same question.
Well, the main reason is that in 1972, the town made Memorial Drive no parking on both sides. And so it's been a long time discussion by older council members, previous council members, that we ought to move this someplace where it's accessible, because you can't park there, you'd have to park at CCAC.
It'd be easier to make 2 spots or 3 spots.
On Memorial Drive?
Yeah.
You could revoke part of the no parking, but that would be.
I mean, just bring in widen the road and, well, I revoke it, but
That would be some expense to widen it, but I mean, it's.
how much more can it be than
It's such a
moving that
it's
thing?
Such a small, well, that's true, there's a cost involved, I had this notion and mentioned it to Kim, and then she said, well, let's see what everybody thinks, at least to see if we should look at it.
I think then we're screwing up the name Memorial Drive. I think we're, who's this? It's got grass there, it's got an area to park. Widen it a little bit and change the no parking. That's a weekend for free.
One other thought is, we would wanna look, I think, perhaps at, the memorial is only for a couple of the wars, and it's been that way for a long time. So it's just food for thought that in the future, we might
Add
wanna
to it.
consider the other.
So we should only have
other-
one, right?
Other conflicts.
There should only be one memorial, or could we have that one
There's a
there
lot of
and put
space
another
there.
down on
Yeah.
Blazer? I don't know, it's
We
just a
could make a
thought.
statue.
We could.
Well, I
We
was
could do
just
that.
thinking,
We could.
because that would be
I
expensive to
thought I'd
move
bring-
that,
I'd
wouldn't
bring the
it?
ice on the
Bill
subject.
Kirk holding a scroll of all the names.
What
Since I've
what
been
conflicts are
injected into this-
represented?
I didn't check, it's
But
been a
when
long
we
time.
discussed this, I thought, we thought perhaps that Vietnam was not on there, Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right,
were
the later
probably on.
conflicts.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Excuse me.
We could do another, because how much would it cost to move that thing?
I think that.
A lot, wouldn't it?
I like Steve's idea. There's room there for the.
Yeah, there's room for a few parking spots and certainly room for
Is there room to put
another
one in the grass?
statue or two, or scroll or tablet or whatever you wanna call it.
That's
an idea.
My only point was to add, this again, it's been something that's been carried forward for years,
I
and
mean, I looked at it once, I stopped
I
once.
thought I should bring it up at some point.
Did you get a ticket?
No.
I would, Madam Chair, I would be interested in talking to our local veterans groups and see how they feel. And see if we could work with them in raising the money, if they had an interest in making it more accessible, either there or at a new location.
It's a good idea.
You mean have them come up with ideas
Thank
to
you.
raise money?
Oh,
See what they say about it.
Absolutely,
See
absolutely.
what their feelings are about it.
Well, particularly with respect to what conflicts or wars should be identified and memorialized. And so it'd be buy-in from the participants to the extent they're still around.
It was just a toss out of an idea, so that, thank you.
You got the thoughts?
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks.
The next to discuss applying for the National Fitness Campaigns, NFC, 2019 campaign, which would entail applying for a grant to help pay for the installation of a fitness court in 2019 near the Lorraine G. Rogers soccer fields. NFC is a private social enterprise founded in 1979 that partners with the corporate sponsors and municipalities and schools to convert public spaces into community fitness hubs. The fitness court would be placed on a 38-foot by 38-foot concrete base. It would contain 30 pieces of equipment set up in 7 different stations where users use their body weight to exercise with rather than using barbells or other weights. The court costs $120,000, with NFC contributing a $30,000 grant. The town is responsible for the $90,000 balance, with NFC assisting in seeking corporate sponsors along with the town prior to the town committing to the project. NFC requires that the town contribute a minimum of $30,000. The town would also be responsible for installing the concrete base, the approximate cost of which is $11,500. Therefore, the town's total minimum commitment would be $41,500. So we need your thoughts on that, if you think that would be a good idea, or not.
Do we have a location?
Yeah, out by the soccer field.
But it doesn't
Which
have to
soccer
go
field?
there.
No, it
They
doesn't
will
have to
help
go.
us find a place. If we don't like that spot, we can put it in another spot. That was just where, we apparently partnered with these people before and had a fitness court there before, back in 1980, early 80s, which was there. It got old, okay, so it's not there anymore. So that would be a logical place, but it doesn't have to go there. The other thing that I don't think was clearly articulated here, you know how we get all that stuff in our mail. This was something that I read last year and called them and said, what about it? And then they're like, oh, well, we're gonna be kind of doing it next year. I'm like, okay, talk to me then. So they sent me some more stuff. And the thing that I don't think is articulated very very well is it's $120,000. We pay 30, they give us 30, that's 60, right? So we got 60 more, but they help us tap into some sponsors. The nice thing is, we don't pay a penny until we have all the sponsors. So it's not like we put in 30 and now we can't get any sponsors and now we're responsible for 60 more
So we don't need
thousand.
to start it until we have all of them.
Well, that's what you do. You apply for this and then they say, yes, we'll choose you, and apparently we get priority. And then they'll help us make these sponsors. But if we don't get any sponsors, then we don't have to spend any money.
We can just back out of it.
We can back out of
Right,
it.
that's
So
right.
that's the
Well,
nice
that's
thing
a
about
good
it.
thing.
But it will cost us $41,000, $500.
Is the initial $30,000 cash up front, or that's sort of a commitment that will be payable once it's all put together?
I didn't see where they said it had to be. I think you make a commitment to it.
Right.
Oh, okay, John, that's right, John.
John's done a lot of good
Sorry.
follow-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially, basically, we would have to apply to August 31st, and they'd tell us if we got it in September, but we don't have to have the cash available by then. There's about a 6-month period after that we work on the sponsors, and we're basically not thrown into it until we start. So like if we have an unfavorable sponsorship situation or we can't come up with the cash, we can back out, no harm, no foul. And apparently that wouldn't look bad for us if we want to apply in the future either, so.
Do we have these
What did we
pictures
lose?
online?
Nothing
It
really.
would almost be foolish not to apply.
Yeah, apparently it's a very brief
I have them, but do we
application,
have them?
Okay.
so it's not like we need to put any resources into that either.
I'm just thinking,
Good to me.
you know.
I mean, if we're not
posting, see
losing
what other
anything
people
by
thought.
applying,
Right, yeah.
I mean, it
Did
seems
you
foolish
post it?
not to.
The one thing is there a deadline?
I'll look on your page and post
August
it from there.
31st, you said?
Yeah, August
Yeah, August
31st.
The application,
Is there a deadline that ultimately NFC says, you had enough time to find, and we've spent a lot of time finding corporate sponsors. Is there a date that they select?
They have no cutoff date. They basically, it depends on the timing of the launch. They said they like to have everything about 2 or 3 months before the work starts, so. Those are-
How long will they keep their commitment, perhaps? Is there a
I'm
question?
not sure at this point. But if they do a 2020 campaign, it sounds like, we wouldn't be looked upon unfavorably, because we're already looked upon favorably by the contact from 2017.
So what's everyone's feeling?
We get points for this too.
For sustainability?
Sustainability.
This is, this
certification.
also gets us points. This also goes
It's
with
another
our
plus.
plan, with our comprehensive plan
Right.
for meeting places, recreation,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So it does kind of meet some of the things that we say we want to do.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the
I don't know that
citizens
I-
would be happy with it.
The soccer field seems like it's already,
Well, it doesn't
it
have to
needs
go
to be
there.
somewhere else, I
We
think,
can
but
put it somewhere. We can decide where. It's just, do you want to go forward with this idea?
131 Montclair.
Stop it. What do you guys think?
I think it sounds like a good idea. What do you think, Bill?
You know, I agree. I just point out that there's a similar setup, not quite like this, but similar to it, out near the, I guess it's near the hockey rink, the hockey ice skating rink in North Park, where there's a series of stations for people to exercise. You know, go up and do some push-ups, some bars of, do push-up, pull-ups and that kind of thing. So it's, so I think it's a sort of a step up and more concentrated than that. I think it seems nice, and,
It's a 25-year warranty too.
yeah. Well, we don't, we're not risking any money, right, until.
Not now,
Until
nope.
we got sponsors, right.
I would say we ought to budget the 41.5 for next year, because that would be our commitment, just so that we would say we'd have those funds on hand, but then we would, if we don't use them, they would go to back in the reserves or to some other purpose.
Is that the
That you would
idea?
designate. I think, yeah, to me, it sounds like no risk. I only asked the question about John to see if there was some cutoff that we'd have to drop out of the 19 cycle and then
So
reapply.
would you be filling out the application?
As far as I know, yes.
Aren't you happy? Okay, but that's good.
So we cough,
It takes now.
we cough up, what, $90,000?
We'll be good. Do it. Tell us what to do.
41.
41.5.
No.
That would be our minimum.
What's this meaning of the town is responsible for $90,000 balance?
Those are the sponsors that they
We
will
would
help
get-
us
we would
get.
get
We have to find $90,000, 30 of it must be ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's, yes, we gotta find 60,000.
Okay.
But it's clear, what is it, 45, how much is the money?
41.5.
41.5, okay.
I have a very good estimate from Jim Betterly, who was pinch hitting for Mark for the 11.5
Okay.
on the cost of putting that pen.
What do you think, Greg?
I just don't believe in exercise.
All it does is
That's fair.
make you tired.
Look at you, because good wind would blow you over.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm doing
Everybody's good with it?
Sounds like it.
Good.
Okay, you're on.
All right.
Okay, any other comment from council? Anyone in the audience? Are you gonna say anything? You want your bed? This concludes the Recreation Committee.
Is there a motion to enter into executive session to discuss litigation and a personnel matter?
So moved.
Second?
Okay. For members of the audience, there will not be any meeting after we're through with this, so.
Then we're done.
We'll be done in